A single father dove into raging floodwaters to save a drowning woman and child, but when the little girl whispered, "Daddy," his world shattered. The woman he pulled from the river carried secrets about his dead wife, and the child in her arms was registered as his daughter, a daughter he never knew existed. What he thought was a rescue mission became the beginning of a nightmare that would force him to confront a past he believed was buried forever. Stay until the end to discover how this impossible mystery unravels, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. The rain had become a living thing in Willow Creek, relentless, hungry, merciless. For 3 days and 3 nights, it had hammered the small mountain town with a fury that old-timers said they hadn't seen in 50 years. The kind of rain that didn't just fall, it attacked. It turned roads into rivers, yards into lakes, and the normally peaceful Willow Creek River into a churning monster that swallowed everything stupid enough to get close. Ethan Ward stood on his front porch at 4 in the morning, coffee cup steaming in his calloused hands, watching the world drown. Sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford, not with half the town at risk of flooding, not with the emergency sirens wailing every few hours, and definitely not with the memories that always surfaced when the rain came. 5 years. 5 years since the flood had taken Rachel from him. 5 years since he'd watched helplessly as the waters claimed the only woman he'd ever loved, leaving him with nothing but an empty house and a 4-year-old son who kept asking when Mommy was coming home. "Dad?" The screen door creaked open behind him. "You okay?" Ethan turned to find his son, Marcus, now 9 years old, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The kid had Rachel's dark hair and Ethan's stubborn jaw, a daily reminder of what they'd built together and what had been stolen away. "I'm fine, buddy," Ethan said, forcing a smile. "Just checking the water levels. Go back to bed." "Can't sleep, too loud." Marcus moved to stand beside him, and Ethan draped an arm around his shoulders. Together they watched the rain assault their small corner of the world, father and son united in their vigil against the storm. The radio on the porch railing crackled to life. "Route 7 bridge is compromised. Repeat, the Route 7 bridge is compromised. Emergency services are stretched thin. We're asking all able-bodied volunteers with rescue experience to report to..." Ethan's phone buzzed before the broadcast finished. It was Tom Chen, the town's volunteer fire chief and one of Ethan's oldest friends. "You hearing this?" Tom's voice was barely audible over the howling wind on his end. "Yeah, I hear it. We need you, man. I know you haven't done water rescue since Rachel, but we're drowning out here. No pun intended. We've got people trapped in the low-lying neighborhoods, and the professionals are tied up with a nursing home evacuation on the south side." Ethan closed his eyes. The last time he'd gone into floodwaters for a rescue, he'd lost his wife. He'd been a Coast Guard rescue swimmer before Marcus was born, had pulled dozens of people from rough seas and raging rivers. But that was before he understood what it meant to lose everything in a single moment. Before he learned that sometimes the water wins, no matter how strong you are, no matter how skilled. "Dad?" Marcus was looking up at him with those 2 knowing eyes. "People need help." Out of the mouths of babes. "I'll be there in 10, Ethan told Tom, and ended the call before his friend could hear the tremor in his voice. 20 minutes later, Ethan was waist-deep in muddy water, helping Mrs. Patterson from 2 streets over carry her photo albums to higher ground. The elderly woman clutched the waterlogged books like they were made of gold, tears streaming down her weathered face. "My whole life is in these," she sobbed. 73 years of memories." "We've got them, Mrs. Patterson," Ethan assured her, his boots squelching in the muck. Every single one. He'd left Marcus with their neighbor, Sarah, who'd promised to keep him safe and dry. Sarah was good people, a school teacher who'd moved to Willow Creek 3 years ago and had become something like an aunt to Marcus. She'd also been, not so subtly, trying to set Ethan up with various single women in town, apparently convinced that 5 years was long enough to grieve. She was wrong. Some losses you never stopped grieving, you just learned to carry them differently. "Ethan," Tom's voice cut through the storm. "We need you at the Riverside neighborhood. The sandbag wall is failing." For the next 2 hours, Ethan worked alongside a dozen other volunteers, stacking sandbags against the inevitable. The water kept rising, The rain kept falling. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice that sounded disturbingly like Rachel's whispered that this was only the beginning. By noon, the exhaustion was bone deep. Ethan's hands were raw, his back screamed, and his clothes were so soaked that he'd stopped feeling the cold. He was taking a 5-minute break, leaning against his truck and trying to convince himself that the coffee in his thermos was still warm when he heard it. A scream. Not the kind of scream you hear at a football game or a surprise party. This was different. This was the sound of pure primal terror, the sound someone makes when they're staring death in the face and death is staring back. Ethan's head snapped up. The scream had come from the direction of the old stone bridge that spanned the widest part of Willow Creek River. Even from 2 blocks away, he could see that the water had risen to just a few feet below the bridge deck. No one should be anywhere near there. The entire area had been cordoned off hours ago. But someone was there. Someone was screaming. Ethan ran. His legs burned as he sprinted down Main Street, dodging debris and abandoned vehicles. The rain pelted his face, making it almost impossible to see. His phone rang. Tom, probably wondering where he'd gone, but he ignored it. Every instinct he'd honed in the Coast Guard, every nerve he'd thought had died with Rachel, roared back to life. Get to them. Move faster. Don't stop. He reached the bridge approach just as he saw the car. Jesus Christ, there was a car in the water. Not just near the water, not partially submerged in some ditch, actually in the river, being swept downstream like a toy. It was a dark blue sedan, maybe a Honda or Toyota, and it was already halfway past the bridge, moving fast in the current. One headlight was still on, casting a ghostly glow through the brown water. Ethan's rescue training kicked in automatically. He scanned the scene, calculating distances, current speed, potential obstacles. The car would be swept past the bridge in less than a minute. 100 yards downstream, the river made a sharp bend where centuries of flooding had toppled dozens of trees into the water, creating a deadly strainer. Anything that went in there didn't come out. The scream came again, and this time Ethan saw her. A woman, maybe 30 yards downstream from the bridge, clinging to a partially submerged tree branch. Her blonde hair was plastered to her head, her face a mask of terror and exhaustion. And in her other arm, held against her chest with desperate strength, was a small child. The child wasn't moving. "Hold on!" Ethan bellowed, though he knew the woman probably couldn't hear him over the roar of the water. "I'm coming." He didn't think. Thinking would have reminded him of all the reasons this was insane. Thinking would have reminded him of Rachel, of that other storm, of watching the waters take her while he was still 50 feet away. Thinking would have paralyzed him. So he didn't think. He just moved. Ethan kicked off his boots, they'd only drag him down, and grabbed a coil of rope from a maintenance shed near the bridge. His hands moved on autopilot, tying a quick bowline around his waist and securing the other end to a steel girder. 20 feet of rope. Not enough to reach them directly, but maybe enough to get close. He said a silent prayer to a god he wasn't sure he believed in anymore and dove into the river. The cold hit him like a physical blow, driving the air from his lungs. The current grabbed him immediately, a massive hand trying to pull him under and downstream. Ethan fought against it, his arms slicing through the water in powerful strokes, his legs kicking with everything he had. The rope went taut, jerking him sideways. He'd reached the end of his tether, still 10 feet short of the woman and child. The branch they clung to was starting to crack. He could see the white splinters appearing in the bark, could hear it groaning even over the storm. "You have to let go of the branch," he shouted. "Kick toward me." The woman's eyes found his, and in them he saw something that made his heart clench. Not just fear, recognition, like she knew him, like she'd been waiting for him. "I can't," she screamed back. "I can't let go of her." "You have to. The branch is breaking. I'll catch you both. I promise." It was a promise he had no right to make. In water like this, with a current this strong, the odds of successfully grabbing both of them were maybe 1 in 3. The odds of getting all 3 of them back to shore alive? Even worse. But what else could he say? The woman looked down at the child in her arms. Ethan saw her lips move, saw her kiss the little girl's forehead. Then, with a courage he could only marvel at, she let go of the branch. The current took them immediately, sweeping them toward Ethan with terrifying speed. He braced himself, planted his feet against a submerged rock, and reached out with both arms. The woman's hand caught his wrist, her grip like iron despite her exhaustion. The force of the collision nearly tore his arm from the socket, but Ethan held on. He pulled them both against his chest, one arm around the woman's waist, and felt the small body of the child between them. "I've got you," he gasped. "I've got you both." He started pulling them back toward shore, hand over hand along the rope. The current fought him every inch, trying to drag them all downstream to those waiting trees, to the death that lurked in the strainer. His muscles screamed, his lungs burned. The cold was starting to sap his strength, making his movements sluggish. But he'd made a promise, and unlike 5 years ago, this time he was going to keep it. Halfway to shore, the woman went limp in his arms. She'd passed out, her body finally surrendering to the cold and exhaustion and terror. Now Ethan was supporting all three of them against the current, his arms wrapped around two bodies that seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. "Come on," he growled through gritted teeth. "Come on, Ethan. You've done harder than this. Move." He pulled them another foot, then another. The shore was so close now, maybe 15 feet, but it might as well have been a mile. His vision was starting to tunnel. The cold was in his bones, making everything slow and heavy. Then he felt hands grabbing him, voices shouting. Tom and 2 other volunteers had seen what was happening and come running. They pulled on the rope, dragging all 3 of them through the shallows and up onto the muddy bank. Ethan collapsed onto his back, gasping, his entire body shaking. The rain pounded his face, but he barely felt it. He was alive. They were alive. "Get blankets!" Tom was yelling. "Someone call an ambulance! Ethan, buddy, you still with us?" "Yeah," Ethan managed. "Yeah, I'm here." He rolled onto his side, coughing up river water, and that's when he finally got a good look at the child he'd pulled from the river. A little girl, maybe 4 years old, with dark hair and pale skin. She wasn't moving. Her lips were blue. Tom was already starting CPR, his hands tiny compressions on her fragile chest. "Come on, sweetheart," Tom muttered. "Come on, breathe for me." Ethan dragged himself closer, his medical training fighting through the fog of exhaustion. Tilt her head back more. Clear the airway first. He reached out to help, his shaking hands positioning the girl's head, and that's when he saw her face clearly for the first time. The world stopped. She had hazel eyes. Even closed, he could see the shape of them, the delicate lashes. The same eyes that had looked at him from across a coffee shop 12 years ago and made him forget his own name. Rachel's eyes. And her nose. That little button nose with the slight upturn at the tip. Rachel's nose. And the shape of her face, the curve of her chin. "Oh my God," Ethan whispered. The little girl's eyes fluttered open. She coughed, water dribbling from her mouth, and dragged in a desperate breath. Her hazel eyes, Rachel's eyes, focused on Ethan's face. She looked at him for a long moment, confused and afraid and cold. Then she smiled, just a tiny quirk of her lips, and whispered one word that shattered Ethan's entire world. "Daddy." Ethan's vision blurred. His hands were still touching the little girl's face, still feeling the warmth returning to her skin. His mind was racing, rejecting what he'd heard, rejecting what couldn't possibly be real. He didn't have a daughter. He had Marcus. Only Marcus. Rachel had died pregnant with their second child. The doctors had confirmed it. The flood had taken them both, hadn't it? "Did she just—" Tom started, but Ethan wasn't listening. The little girl's eyes were closing again, her burst of consciousness fading. But before they shut completely, she reached up with one small, cold hand and touched Ethan's cheek. Her lips moved, forming words he could barely hear. "Don't leave again, Daddy." Then she went limp in his arms. "No, no, no," Ethan said, panic flooding his chest. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Stay with me." The ambulance arrived seconds later, sirens wailing through the storm. Paramedics surrounded them, taking the little girl from Ethan's arms, checking vitals, barking medical jargon at each other. They loaded her onto a gurney, wrapped her in silver thermal blankets, started an IV with practiced efficiency. "Sir, we need to check you out too," one of the paramedics said to Ethan. "You're hypothermic?" "The woman," Ethan interrupted. "The woman I pulled out with her. Where is she?" He looked around and found her 10 feet away, surrounded by her own team of paramedics. She was conscious now, barely, her eyes blinking slowly as they examined her. She was saying something, her lips moving, but Ethan couldn't hear her over the chaos. "Both of them are going to County General," the paramedic told him. "You should come too, sir. You've been in that water for—" "I'm fine," Ethan lied. He wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. That little girl had called him Daddy. She had Rachel's eyes. She had— No, it wasn't possible. There had to be an explanation. Confusion from the trauma, maybe. Or mistaken identity. Maybe she thought he was someone else. Kids got confused when they were scared and hurt. That had to be it. But then why did she have Rachel's eyes? "Ethan," Tom gripped his shoulder. "Let them check you out. You nearly died out there." "I said I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're in shock. I can see it. Come on, man. Let them help you." Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to push Tom away and run after that ambulance, to demand answers from a little girl who couldn't possibly have them. But his body was shutting down, the adrenaline finally draining away and leaving nothing but bone-deep cold and exhaustion. He let them wrap him in blankets, let them guide him into the ambulance, let them stick an IV in his arm and take his blood pressure and shine lights in his eyes. But he never stopped thinking about those hazel eyes, those eyes that shouldn't exist. That little girl who shouldn't exist. And that one impossible word, Daddy. The ride to County General Hospital was a blur of flashing lights and urgent voices. Ethan sat on the ambulance bench, wrapped in thermal blankets that did nothing to stop his shivering, watching the paramedics work on the little girl. She was so small on that gurney, surrounded by equipment and tubes and monitors beeping urgently. "Vitals are stabilizing," one of the paramedics reported. "Core temp is coming up. That's good. That's really good." "The woman?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse from swallowing river water. "In the other ambulance. She's conscious and talking, which is a good sign. You saved both their lives out there, sir. That was incredibly brave, incredibly stupid, but brave." Ethan didn't feel brave. He felt hollowed out, like someone had reached inside him and scooped out everything that made sense, leaving only questions and impossible memories. The little girl stirred, her head turning slightly. Even unconscious, she looked peaceful, like she was just sleeping. Like Marcus used to look when he was that age, curled up in his race car bed with his favorite stuffed elephant clutched to his chest. Marcus. God, Marcus was still at Sarah's house, probably worried sick. Ethan fumbled for his phone, miraculously still in his waterlogged pocket, but it was dead. The river had killed it. "Can I borrow your phone?" he asked the paramedic. "I need to call my son. Let him know I'm okay." The paramedic handed over his cell without hesitation. Ethan dialed Sarah's number from memory. She answered on the first ring. "Hello?" "Sarah, it's Ethan." "Oh, thank God!" Sarah's relief was palpable. "Marcus has been glued to the window for the past hour. He saw the ambulances. Are you hurt?" "I'm okay, just cold. There was a rescue, a woman and a little girl in the river. I pulled them out." "Of course you did." Sarah's voice held a mixture of pride and exasperation. "Because apparently you have a death wish. Does Marcus need to worry about losing another parent?" The words hit harder than she probably intended. "I'm fine, Sarah, really. I'll be at County General for observation, probably a few hours. Can you keep Marcus a bit longer?" "You know I can. Take care of yourself, Ethan. Marcus needs you." "I know." He ended the call and handed the phone back, his eyes returning to the little girl. In the harsh ambulance lighting, he could see details he'd missed on the riverbank. A small scar above her right eyebrow, a smattering of freckles across her nose. Her dark hair, still wet from the river, had a slight curl to it. Rachel's hair had curled exactly like that when it was wet. "Stop it," Ethan told himself. "You're seeing what you want to see. Grief playing tricks on you. It's been 5 years and you're still looking for her in every face, every stranger. This little girl just happens to have similar features. That's all. That's—" "Daddy." Ethan's breath caught. The little girl's eyes were open, staring directly at him. Those impossible hazel eyes, lucid now, focused and aware. "Hi, sweetheart," he said gently, moving closer. "You're safe now. You're in an ambulance. We're taking you to the hospital." "You came back." Her voice was barely a whisper, scratchy and weak. "You found us." Ethan didn't know what to say. I pulled you from the river, you and the woman you were with. Do you remember? The little girl nodded slowly. Aunt Claire, is she okay? She's in another ambulance. The paramedics say she's going to be fine. Relief flooded the little girl's face. She tried to save me. She told me to hold on tight. She said, her eyes welled with tears. She said my daddy would come. And you did. Ethan's heart was hammering so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. Sweetheart, I think maybe you're confused. The water was cold, and sometimes when people are scared, you're Ethan Ward. She said his name with complete certainty. You have a son named Marcus. You used to save people in the ocean before you came home. And you're my daddy. The ambulance suddenly felt too small, the air too thin. How did she know these things? How did she know Marcus's name? How did she... What's your name? Ethan asked, his voice barely steady. The little girl's hand found his, her small fingers wrapping around his much larger ones. Lila, she said. My name is Lila Ward. The world tilted. Lila, Rachel's favorite name. They'd talked about it once, years ago, lying in bed on a lazy Sunday morning. If we have a daughter, Rachel had said, tracing patterns on his chest, I want to name her Lila. It means night in Hebrew, beautiful and mysterious, just like she'll be. But they'd never had a daughter. They'd had Marcus, and then they'd been trying for a second child, and then the flood. How old are you, Lila? Ethan asked. 4.5. She said it with the pride of a child who counted every half year as a major milestone. My birthday was in April. 4.5 years old, which meant she would have been born. Ethan did the math in his head, even though part of him didn't want to, 4.5 years ago. 9 months before that would be July, 5 years ago, the month before Rachel died. No, it still didn't make sense. Rachel had been pregnant when she died. The medical examiner had confirmed it. 8 weeks pregnant. They'd been so happy, starting to plan for their growing family. And then the flood had come and taken her, taken their unborn child, taken everything. Unless... Lila, where's your mommy? Ethan asked, though his throat felt like it was closing. The little girl's eyes filled with tears. Mommy went away, a long time ago. Aunt Claire said Mommy had to go away to keep me safe, but she left me with Aunt Claire and she said one day my real daddy would find me. Ethan couldn't breathe. The pieces were there, scattered around him like a jigsaw puzzle. But they couldn't possibly fit together the way his mind was trying to make them fit. It was impossible. It was, We're here, the paramedic announced as the ambulance lurched to a stop. County General, let's get her inside. The next hour was chaos. Ethan was separated from Lila, taken to one examination room while she went to another. Doctors poked and prodded him, took his temperature, listened to his lungs, declared him remarkably intact for someone who took a swim in a raging river. They wanted to admit him overnight for observation, but he refused. He wasn't going anywhere until he had answers. He found Tom in the emergency room waiting area, coffee in hand and worry etched across his face. There you are, Tom said, standing quickly. The doctor said you're okay? Define okay. Ethan collapsed into a plastic chair. Where's the woman, the one I pulled out? I need to talk to her. Claire something or other. She's 2 rooms down being treated for hypothermia and exhaustion. Awake and coherent, from what I heard. Why? What's going on, Ethan? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe he had. Maybe that's exactly what this was. A ghost of a life that never existed, haunting him with impossible truths. The little girl, Ethan said. Lila, she called me Daddy, Tom frowned. Yeah, I heard that on the riverbank. Must have been confused. Trauma does strange things to... She knows my name, Tom. She knows Marcus's name. She said... Ethan's voice broke. She said her name is Lila Ward. Tom's frown deepened. Ward? As in, your last name. As in my last name. As in the name Rachel and I talked about giving to a daughter we never had. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on his knees, head in his hands. She has Rachel's eyes, Tom. Exactly Rachel's eyes. Ethan, that's not possible. Rachel died 5 years ago. You saw it happen. I know what I saw. I know what the medical examiner told me. But I also know what I'm seeing right now. Ethan looked up at his friend. I need to talk to that woman, Claire. I need to know what the hell is going on. Before Tom could respond, a young nurse approached them, clipboard in hand and a confused expression on her face. Are you Ethan Ward? She asked. Yes. There's a situation with the child you brought in, Lila. The nurse glanced at her clipboard as if it might suddenly make more sense. When we ran her through the system to create a patient file, her birth certificate came up in the database. And, according to the official records, you're listed as her father. Ethan felt like he'd been punched. That's not possible. I understand this must be confusing, but it's right here in the state registry. She turned the clipboard to show him. There, in black and white, was a birth certificate for Lila Marie Ward. Date of birth, April 15th, 5 years ago. Mother, Rachel Ann Ward. Father, Ethan James Ward. This is a mistake, Ethan said, but his voice sounded hollow, even to his own ears. This has to be a mistake. Sir, I just processed the paperwork, but if you're saying you didn't know about this child, we may need to contact Child Services. No. The word came out sharper than Ethan intended. No, don't do that yet. Let me talk to the woman who was with her, Claire. Where is she? The nurse hesitated, then gestured down the hallway. Room 7, but she's... Ethan was already moving, Tom scrambling to follow. They found room 7 at the end of the corridor, its door slightly ajar. Inside, a blonde woman sat propped up on a hospital bed, an IV in her arm, and exhaustion carved into every line of her face. She was maybe 35, with the kind of features that suggested she'd been beautiful before whatever hell she'd been through had worn her down. Her eyes met Ethan's as he entered, and recognition flashed across her face. Not surprise, recognition, like she'd been expecting him. Ethan Ward, she said, her voice hoarse but steady. I was hoping you'd come. You know who I am. Yes. Claire tried to sit up straighter and winced. I've known about you for almost 5 years. Rachel made sure I knew everything about you. The name hit him like a physical blow. Rachel. My wife, Rachel. Yes. My wife who died 5 years ago. Yes. Ethan moved closer to the bed, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. Then you need to explain to me how the hell there's a 4-year-old girl out there who has a birth certificate with my name on it. You need to explain how she has my wife's eyes. You need to explain... His voice broke. He couldn't finish. Claire's eyes welled with tears. I will, she said softly. I'll explain everything. But you need to sit down, Ethan. Because what I'm about to tell you, it's going to change everything you thought you knew about the day Rachel died. Ethan sank into the visitor's chair beside the bed, Tom standing behind him like a silent anchor. His whole body was shaking, and not from the cold anymore. Tell me, he said. Tell me everything. Claire took a shaky breath. Rachel didn't die in that flood, Ethan. Not right away. The words hung in the air between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. Rachel didn't die in that flood. Not right away. Ethan's mind rejected them instantly, violently, the way a body rejects a transplanted organ that doesn't match. That's not possible, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I was there. I saw the car go into the water. I dove in after her. I searched for hours. They found her body 3 days later, downstream near Miller's Bend. I identified her myself. Claire's face crumpled with something that looked like guilt. You identified a body, yes. But Ethan, it wasn't Rachel. The room seemed to tilt. Tom's hand landed on Ethan's shoulder, steadying him, grounding him to something real, while his entire world threatened to dissolve into chaos. You need to explain, Tom said, his voice hard. Right now, no more cryptic statements. What the hell are you talking about? Claire wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm Rachel's cousin. We grew up together in Portland, but we lost touch after high school. She reached out to me about 6 months before the flood. She was scared, Ethan, terrified. She said she'd witnessed something she shouldn't have, that dangerous people were watching her, that she needed help. Witnessed what? Ethan demanded. Rachel never said anything to me about being in danger. She would have told me. She didn't tell you because she was trying to protect you and Marcus. These weren't the kind of people you go to the police about. They had connections everywhere, cops, judges, social workers. Rachel said if she went public, you'd all be killed. Ethan's mind raced back through those last months with Rachel. Had there been signs? Had she been different, scared, pulling away? He thought about it now, with the brutal clarity of hindsight. She had been more protective of Marcus, keeping him closer than usual. She'd started checking the locks on the doors twice every night. She'd flinched at unexpected phone calls. He'd thought it was just pregnancy anxiety, the normal fears of a mother preparing to bring another child into an uncertain world. God, how blind had he been? What did she witness? Tom asked. Claire's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. An illegal adoption ring. Rachel was volunteering at a women's shelter in Riverside. You remember that, right, Ethan? He nodded numbly. Rachel had spent 2 afternoons a week at Hope House, helping women and children escape domestic violence. She'd been so passionate about it, said it gave her purpose beyond being a wife and mother. He'd supported it completely, proud of her compassion, her strength. One of the women at the shelter, Maria, confided in Rachel that her baby had been taken from her, not by child services, by private individuals who said they were from an adoption agency. Maria was undocumented, scared, didn't speak much English. They told her she had no choice, that her baby would have a better life with a wealthy family. They gave her $500 and made her sign papers she couldn't read. Claire paused, her eyes distant with memory. Rachel started digging. She found 3 other women with similar stories. Babies taken under questionable circumstances, always from vulnerable mothers, undocumented immigrants, homeless women, addicts. The adoption agency was called Blessed Beginnings. It looked legitimate on the surface, but Rachel discovered they were falsifying documents, bribing officials, selling babies to desperate couples who would pay anything for a child. And she got caught investigating, Ethan said, the pieces starting to fall into a horrible pattern. She took photos of documents, recorded conversations. She was building a case to take to the FBI when one of the people involved spotted her. Claire's hands trembled on the thin hospital blanket. A man named Dalton Briggs. He ran the whole operation. Rachel came to my apartment that night and told me everything. She was 8 weeks pregnant, terrified, and absolutely convinced they were going to kill her. Ethan felt like he was drowning all over again, pulled under by currents of information he couldn't process fast enough. So what happened? Why did everyone think she died in the flood? Because she planned it that way. Claire's voice broke. It was the only way to protect you and Marcus. She knew Briggs would come after her family if she just disappeared. So she staged her death. The hospital room was silent except for the beeping of monitors and the distant sound of announcements over the PA system. Ethan stared at Claire, trying to find any hint of deception in her face, any sign that this was an elaborate con or delusion. But all he saw was grief and truth. How? He asked. The flood, the car, the body. How did she fake all of that? She didn't have to fake much. The flood was real. The danger was real. Rachel drove to the river that night, knowing it was going to overflow. She left her car near the bank where the water was rising fastest. She'd already arranged everything with a woman named Susan Kohler, a Jane Doe who died of an overdose 3 weeks earlier at the shelter. Rachel had helped clean out her belongings, knew she had no family, no one looking for her. Ethan's stomach turned. Jesus Christ. Rachel took Susan's body from the morgue. She had help, someone at the shelter with medical access who owed her a favor. She put Susan in her car, weighted down so the body wouldn't surface immediately. Then she let the flood take it. By the time they recovered the body 3 days later, it was damaged enough that identification was difficult. Similar height, similar build, similar hair color. The DNA testing was delayed because of the disaster. So many casualties, so much chaos. By the time they might have looked closer, you'd already identified her as Rachel based on the physical markers. Ethan remembered that day in the morgue with crystalline clarity. The body had been bloated, damaged by rocks and debris, but she'd been wearing Rachel's wedding ring, her favorite necklace. The medical examiner had pointed out the small scar on her left forearm from a childhood bike accident. Ethan had looked at these details and seen his wife, because that's what his grieving brain needed to see. The scar. he said hoarsely. Rachel had a scar on her left forearm. So did Susan. Different origin but similar placement and size. Rachel knew that when she chose her. Claire's voice was thick with unshed tears. She thought of everything, Ethan, every detail, because she knew you'd look and she needed you to believe she was really gone. And the pregnancy? Tom asked quietly. The medical examiner said she was 8 weeks pregnant. Susan was pregnant too, same gestational age, almost to the day. That's one of the reasons Rachel chose her. She knew they'd check, knew that detail would seal the identification. Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. He couldn't sit still, couldn't contain the storm of emotions tearing through him. Rage, grief, confusion, betrayal. They all crashed together into something too big to name. She let me think she was dead, he said, his voice shaking. For 5 years she let me mourn her. She let Marcus grow up thinking his mother was dead. Do you have any idea what that did to him? What that did to us? She did it to save your lives, Claire said, tears streaming down her face now. Briggs would have killed you both if he'd thought Rachel was alive and hiding. Your grief had to be real, Ethan. You had to genuinely believe she was gone. It was the only way to keep you safe. Safe from what? Where the hell has she been for 5 years? Claire looked away. I don't know. After she staged her death, she came to me one last time. She was 6 months pregnant by then, hiding in a motel room in Nevada, terrified to go to any hospital because hospitals keep records. She asked me to help her when the time came. You delivered Lila, Ethan said, in a roadside motel outside Reno with nothing but towels and prayers and a first aid kit from a gas station. It was the most terrifying night of my life. Claire's voice was distant, lost in memory. But Lila was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, Rachel's eyes, and your stubborn chin. She was so beautiful, Ethan. And then what? Rachel just abandoned her daughter? She didn't abandon her. Claire's voice rose, defensive and fierce. She loved that baby more than anything. But Briggs's people were still looking for her. She couldn't take Lila with her. A woman traveling alone with an infant draws attention. So she left Lila with me. Temporarily, she said. Just until she could find solid evidence against Briggs, until she could bring him down and make it safe to come home. 4.5 years, Ethan said bitterly. That's a hell of a temporary arrangement. She never stopped trying. She sent me money every month, called whenever it was safe. She was gathering evidence, building a case, but Briggs was always one step ahead. Every time she got close, he'd cover his tracks. 3 years ago, she told me she had something concrete, documentation that would destroy him. She was going to turn it over to a federal prosecutor she trusted. That was the last time I heard from her. The room fell silent. Ethan knew what was coming before Claire said it. I think Briggs found her, Claire whispered. I think this time the death was real. Ethan sank back into the chair, all the fight draining out of him. If Rachel had really been alive all this time, working to protect them, fighting to come home, and then been killed when she was finally close to succeeding, the tragedy of it was almost too much to bear. Why come back now? Tom asked. Why bring Lila here, to Willow Creek? Because I had no choice, Claire said. A week ago, someone broke into my apartment in Portland. They ransacked it, looking for something. I think Briggs's people somehow found out about Lila, about the connection to Rachel. I grabbed what I could, took Lila, and ran. I was trying to get to my sister's place in Eugene when the flood hit. The roads were all closed, detours everywhere. I ended up on that bridge and the car just went into the water. And Lila knew about me, Ethan said. She called me Daddy. Rachel made me promise to tell her about you. Every night before bed, we'd talk about her daddy, Ethan, who used to save people from the ocean. About her big brother, Marcus, who loved dinosaurs and racing cars. About the home she'd have one day when it was safe. Lila's been waiting her whole life to meet you. Ethan's eyes burned. He thought about that little girl in the other room, the daughter he never knew existed, who'd been raised on stories of a father she'd never met. The daughter Rachel had given up everything to protect. I want to see her, he said, right now. The doctor said she needs rest, Claire started. I don't care what the doctor said. That's my daughter. I need to see her. Tom gripped his shoulder again. Let me go check on her condition, see if visitors are okay. Just give me 5 minutes. After Tom left, Ethan and Claire sat in heavy silence. There were 1,000 questions he should ask, 1,000 details he needed to understand. But only one thing really mattered. "Do you think Rachel's really dead?" he asked. Claire's face crumpled. "I don't know. I want to believe she's out there somewhere, that she'll show up one day with that smile of hers and explain everything. But Ethan, it's been 3 years with no contact. Rachel would never go that long without checking on Lila unless something terrible happened." "But you don't know for sure." "No, I don't know for sure." It was a thread of hope, thin and fragile, but Ethan grabbed onto it anyway. Because the alternative, that Rachel had survived the flood, given birth to their daughter, spent years fighting to come home, only to be murdered when she was so close, that was too cruel even for a universe that had already taken so much from him. Tom returned a few minutes later, a nurse in tow. "Lila's awake," he said, "and asking for you." Ethan stood on legs that felt like water. The nurse led them down the corridor to a pediatric room painted with cheerful murals of animals and rainbows. It felt obscene, all that artificial brightness, when his entire world had just been turned inside out. Lila was sitting up in bed, dwarfed by pillows and blankets, an IV taped to her tiny hand. When she saw Ethan, her face lit up with joy so pure it physically hurt to witness. "Daddy," she said, reaching for him. "You're still here." Ethan moved to her bedside, his movements mechanical, his mind still struggling to accept this reality. Up close, the resemblance to Rachel was even more striking. Not just the eyes, but the shape of her smile, the way her nose crinkled when she was happy. She was like a ghost made flesh, a piece of Rachel returned to him from beyond death. "Hi, Lila," he said, his voice rough. "How are you feeling?" "My head hurts, and I'm really cold, but the nice lady said that's normal after swimming in the river." She tilted her head, studying him with unsettling intensity. "You look different than your pictures." "Pictures?" "The ones Aunt Claire showed me. You look older, sadder." "Out of the mouths of babes." "It's been a long 5 years, sweetheart." Lila reached out and took his hand, her tiny fingers wrapping around his. "Aunt Claire said you didn't know about me. She said Mommy had to keep me secret to keep us all safe. But I'm not a secret anymore, right? I can be your daughter now?" The hope in her voice broke something inside him. This child had spent her entire life waiting for a father she'd never met, being shuttled around by a relative doing her best but never able to provide a real home. And now here she was, looking at him like he held all the answers, like his acceptance would make everything okay. "You were always my daughter," Ethan said, and realized he meant it. The circumstances were insane, the revelation world-shattering, but this child existed. She had his DNA, Rachel's features, and a birth certificate with his name on it. She was his daughter, whether he'd known about her or not. "Does that mean I get to meet Marcus?" Lila asked eagerly. "I've always wanted a big brother. Aunt Claire said he's really smart and brave like you." Ethan thought about Marcus back at Sarah's house, completely unaware that his family had just doubled in size. How did you tell a 9-year-old that his dead mother had actually been alive, had given birth to a sister he'd never known about, and might now be truly dead for real this time? How did you even begin to explain that? "You'll meet him soon," Ethan promised. "But right now, you need to rest and get better, okay?" "Okay." Lila's eyes were already drooping, exhaustion pulling her back toward sleep. "Will you stay?" "Aunt Claire always stayed until I fell asleep." "I'll stay as long as they let me." He pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down, still holding her hand. Within minutes, she was asleep, her breathing deep and even. Ethan watched her chest rise and fall, this impossible child, this gift from a ghost. Tom had quietly slipped out during their conversation, giving them privacy. Now a new figure appeared in the doorway, a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and a badge clipped to her belt. "Mr. Ward, I'm Detective Sarah Morrison with the Oregon State Police. Do you have a few minutes to talk?" Ethan glanced at Lila, reluctant to leave her even for a moment. The detective seemed to understand. "We can talk here," she said, stepping into the room and keeping her voice low. "I've been speaking with Ms. Kohler in the other room. She's told me quite a story about adoption trafficking, staged deaths, and threats to her life. I need to know if you can corroborate any of this." I didn't know any of it until an hour ago, Ethan said. My wife, my late wife, never told me she was in danger. If she had, you would have tried to help and possibly gotten yourself killed, Morrison finished. Ms. Kohler indicated as much. But the fact remains, we now have a child who's been living off-grid for 4 years, a woman claiming to be fleeing from dangerous criminals, and a birth certificate that may or may not be legitimate. Ethan's protective instincts flared. Are you suggesting Lila isn't my daughter? I'm suggesting we need to verify the facts. DNA testing, investigation of these trafficking claims, confirmation of your late wife's activities. This is a complex situation, Mr. Ward. Child services will need to be involved. Like hell they will. Ethan stood, keeping his voice low but letting steel enter his tone. That little girl has been through enough trauma. She's not going into the system. I understand you're protective, but no buts. Run your DNA test. I'll give you a sample right now. You'll find out she's mine. And when you do, she's coming home with me. Morrison studied him for a long moment. Ms. Kohler mentioned a man named Dalton Briggs. Do you know that name? Never heard it before today. What about Blessed Beginnings Adoption Services? Ethan shook his head. I'll need to look into both. If there's any truth to this trafficking operation, we have a much bigger problem than one little girl's paternity. Morrison pulled out a business card. I'll be in touch soon. In the meantime, Lila will need to stay here under hospital care until we sort this out. I'm sorry, but that's procedure. After Morrison left, Ethan sank back into his chair, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. The adrenaline had long since worn off, leaving only bone-deep weariness and emotional whiplash. He'd woken up this morning as a single father of one, a widower still carrying the grief of losing his wife 5 years ago. Now he was the father of 2, with a supposedly dead wife who might still be alive somewhere, and dangerous criminals potentially hunting his family. His phone, or rather, the borrowed phone, buzzed. Tom had left it on the bedside table. Ethan checked the screen and saw a text from Sarah. Marcus is getting worried. Should I tell him anything? What could he tell her? That she should sit Marcus down and explain that reality had just performed a backflip? That the mother he'd mourned was both more alive and more dead than they'd thought? That he had a sister he'd never heard of? Ethan texted back, Keep him there. I'll explain everything when I get home. Might be late. He spent the next 2 hours sitting beside Lila's bed, watching her sleep and trying to process everything Claire had told him. His mind kept circling back to the same questions. If Rachel was really alive, where was she? If she was dead, how had it happened? And what the hell did Dalton Briggs want with Lila? A nurse came in around dinner time to check Lila's vitals. She's doing remarkably well, the nurse said softly. Kids are resilient. The doctor wants to keep her overnight for observation, but she should be able to go home tomorrow if there are no complications. Home. The word felt loaded with meaning. Lila had never had a real home, had spent 4 years in hiding with Claire, moving from apartment to apartment, never settling anywhere long enough to call it home. Could Ethan give her that? Could he take this stranger daughter into his house, integrate her into his life, make her part of a family that had learned to function without her? Could he do anything else? Lila stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Daddy, you're still here. I promised I'd stay, didn't I? She smiled, that heartbreaking smile that was so much like Rachel's. Are you hungry? I'm really hungry. The nurse said I could have dinner soon. Do you want to eat with me? The normality of the question, a child asking a parent to share a meal, felt surreal given the circumstances, but Ethan found himself nodding. Sure, sweetheart. I'll eat with you. The nurse brought 2 trays, one with chicken nuggets and apple slices for Lila, one with a sad-looking sandwich for Ethan. They ate together in companionable silence, Lila occasionally offering observations about the food or the room or the stuffed bear the nurses had given her. His name is River, she announced, holding up the bear. Because that's where Daddy found me. That's a good name, Ethan said. Do you think Marcus will like him? Will Marcus like me? The vulnerability in her voice cut deep. Marcus is going to love you, Ethan said, hoping it was true. He's always wanted a sibling. Really? Lila's eyes lit up. Aunt Claire said I might have to work hard to get him to like me, that big brothers can be mean sometimes. Marcus isn't mean. He's a good kid, A little shy sometimes, but good. Ethan set down his sandwich. Lila, did Aunt Claire tell you much about your mom? About Rachel? Lila's expression grew serious. She said Mommy was the bravest person she ever knew, that she was fighting bad people to keep us safe, and that she loved me more than anything, even though she couldn't be with me. That's all true, Ethan said. Your mom was incredibly brave. Is she ever coming back? The question hung in the air between them. Ethan wanted to say yes, wanted to give this little girl the hope that one day her mother would return. But he'd learned the hard way that false hope could be crueler than honesty. I don't know, he said finally. I wish I did, but I don't. Lila nodded, accepting this with the resigned wisdom of a child who'd already learned that life didn't always have happy endings. That's what Aunt Claire always said too, but she said even if Mommy can't come back, I'll always have you and Marcus. Is that true? Yes, Ethan said without hesitation. That's true. You'll always have us. A soft knock on the door interrupted them. Claire stood there, leaning heavily on a nurse's arm, an IV pole wheeling beside her. I told them I needed to check on Lila, she said. They weren't happy about it, but I can be persuasive when motivated. Aunt Claire! Lila's whole face lit up. Look, I have a bear, and Daddy's been here the whole time, just like he promised. Claire's eyes met Ethan's over Lila's head, gratitude and guilt mixing in her expression. Can we talk? She asked quietly. There's more I need to tell you. Ethan glanced at Lila, who was busy showing River the bear all the features of the hospital room. Lila, I'm going to step outside with Aunt Claire for a few minutes. Will you be okay? I'm okay. River will protect me. In the hallway, Claire leaned against the wall, looking like she might collapse at any moment. I didn't tell you everything, she said. About Briggs. About what Rachel discovered. What else is there? Rachel found evidence that Briggs wasn't just trafficking babies from vulnerable women. He was working with certain medical professionals to identify pregnant women with genetic abnormalities in their fetuses. He'd convince them to give up the babies after birth, then falsify the medical records to show the abnormalities didn't exist. He sold these babies to couples who didn't want to deal with genetic testing or wait for healthy adoptions. Ethan felt sick. That's evil. It's evil. But it was also profitable. Rachel estimated he'd done this with at least 20 babies over 5 years, and that was just in Oregon. She found evidence he had connections in Washington and California too. Why are you telling me this now? Claire's voice dropped even lower. Because one of the couples who bought a baby from Briggs was Senator James Hartley and his wife, the senator who's currently running for governor of Oregon. If that connection ever came to light, it would destroy his career. The implications crashed over Ethan like a wave. So we're not just dealing with some criminal running an adoption ring. We're dealing with someone who has powerful connections, political protection. Exactly. That's why Rachel could never get the evidence to stick. Every time she tried to go public, doors closed. Prosecutors suddenly refused to take meetings. FBI agents claimed they couldn't verify her information. Briggs has protection all the way up. And you brought Lila here. I didn't know where else to go. My apartment was compromised, my phone probably tapped. I couldn't lead them to my sister. You were the only person I could think of who might be able to protect her. Claire's voice broke. I'm sorry, Ethan. I know this isn't fair to you, isn't what you signed up for, but Rachel trusted you completely. She said if anything ever happened to her, you were the only person she'd trust with Lila. Ethan looked back through the window into Lila's room. The little girl was having an animated conversation with her stuffed bear, her hands gesturing enthusiastically. She looked so small in that hospital bed, so fragile, and yet she'd survived 4 years in hiding, a car crash into a flooded river, and the revelation that the father she'd dreamed about for so long was a complete stranger who didn't even know she existed. She was tougher than she looked. She was Rachel's daughter, after all. What did Rachel tell you about me? Ethan asked. When she left Lila with you, what did she say? Claire's expression softened. She said you were the best man she'd ever known, that you'd dive into any storm to save someone who needed help, that you'd protect Lila with your life once you knew she existed. She said, Claire's voice caught. She said her only regret about faking her death was that she couldn't tell you the truth. that lying to you broke her heart more than leaving ever could. Ethan's eyes burned. He'd mourned Rachel for 5 years, had slowly rebuilt his life around the hole she'd left behind, and now he was learning that she'd been out there somewhere, loving him from a distance, fighting to come home, carrying that same grief he'd been carrying. It was almost too much. "I need to tell Marcus," he said. "I need to figure out how to explain this to my son." "Our son," Claire corrected gently. "Marcus is Lila's brother. They're family, whether they've met or not." Family. The word felt different now, bigger and more complicated. Ethan's family had been him and Marcus for so long. Now suddenly it included a daughter he'd never known, and might include a wife who was alive or dead depending on which version of reality he chose to believe. "The police are going to investigate," Ethan said. "Detective Morrison seems thorough. If there's any truth to this Briggs connection, any evidence Rachel gathered—" "Rachel hid copies of everything," Claire interrupted. "She gave me a safety deposit box key 3 years ago, before she went after Briggs. She said if anything happened to her, the evidence was in a bank in Salem. But she never told me which bank, and I've never been able to figure it out." "Did you tell Morrison this?" "Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first." Claire's eyes held his. This evidence could destroy Briggs and everyone connected to him. But it could also get us all killed. Rachel died trying to expose these people. Are you willing to take that risk? Ethan thought about Marcus at home, oblivious to the danger potentially heading their way. He thought about Lila in that hospital bed, trusting him to keep her safe. He thought about Rachel, who'd sacrificed everything trying to protect them all. "I won't let them hurt my family," he said. "Not again. So yes, I'm willing to take the risk. But we do this smart. We find that evidence, we give it to people we can trust, and we make damn sure Briggs goes down so hard he never gets back up." Claire nodded slowly. "Rachel was right about you. You really are the best man she ever knew. I was the man she lied to for 5 years. To protect you. To protect Marcus. To protect the daughter you didn't know you had." Claire reached out and gripped his arm. "Don't be angry at her for that, Ethan. She made impossible choices in an impossible situation. She did the best she could." Maybe that was true. Maybe Rachel had made the only choices available to her, but that didn't make them hurt any less. It didn't change the fact that Ethan had spent 5 years grieving a death that hadn't happened, raising their son alone when he could have had help, missing the first 4 years of his daughter's life. But it also didn't change the fact that somewhere out there, Dalton Briggs and his associates were probably looking for Lila right now. And if they found her, all of Rachel's sacrifices would be for nothing. "I need to get home," Ethan said. "I need to talk to Marcus before he hears about this from someone else. Can you stay with Lila tonight?" "Of course, I'm not going anywhere." Claire's smile was tired but genuine. "She's safe here, Ethan. Hospital security, police involvement. They're not going to try anything in such a public place." Ethan wanted to believe that, but he'd learned today that the world was far more dangerous than he'd thought, that people he should have been able to trust, police, judges, officials, might be compromised. He couldn't assume anywhere was truly safe anymore. He went back into Lila's room. She was dozing again, River the bear clutched to her chest. Ethan leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. "I'll be back tomorrow," he whispered. "I promise." Her eyes opened just a crack. "You always keep your promises, Daddy," she murmured, then drifted back to sleep. Walking out of that hospital felt like the hardest thing Ethan had ever done. Every instinct screamed at him to stay, to stand guard over this daughter he'd just found. But Marcus needed him too, needed to hear the truth before rumors started spreading through their small town. Tom was waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his truck with 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing one over. "You're a saint. I'm a friend who knows you're about to have the worst conversation of your life. How do you tell a 9-year-old that his whole world just changed?" "Very carefully, and probably badly." Ethan took a long drink of coffee, letting the heat ground him. "Did Morrison talk to you?" "Yeah, she's pulling records on Blessed Beginnings, looking into Briggs, trying to verify Claire's story. She seems solid, Ethan, like she actually wants to help." "Good. We're going to need help." Ethan filled Tom in on what Claire had told him about the evidence, the safety deposit box, The connections to Senator Hartley. Tom whistled low. This is bigger than we thought. Much bigger, which means more dangerous. You want protection? I can have guys from the fire department keep an eye on your house, set up a rotation. The offer touched Ethan more than he could express. Let me talk to Marcus first, see where his head is at, then we'll figure out security. They drove back to Willow Creek in Tom's truck, the rain finally easing to a light drizzle. The streets were still flooded, debris scattered everywhere, but the worst of the storm seemed to have passed. Ethan's house came into view, a modest two-story with a wraparound porch, the home he and Rachel had bought when Marcus was a baby. It looked exactly the same as it had this morning, but everything felt different now. Sarah's car was still in the driveway. Through the living room window, Ethan could see her and Marcus sitting on the couch, probably watching a movie to distract from the storm. Normal domestic life, about to be shattered by impossible truths. You want me to come in? Tom asked. No, this is something I need to do alone. But thanks for everything today, Tom. I mean it. That's what friends are for. Call me if you need anything. And I mean anything. Middle of the night. Doesn't matter. I'm here. After Tom drove away, Ethan stood on his own porch for a long moment, gathering courage. Through the window, he could see Marcus laughing at something on TV, his whole face lit up with simple joy. In a few minutes, that joy would be complicated by confusion, questions, probably anger. Ethan had to tell him anyway. He opened the door. Dad! Marcus jumped up from the couch, relief flooding his face. You're okay. Sarah said you pulled people out of the river, but you were fine, but I was still worried, and I'm fine, buddy, Ethan assured him, pulling Marcus into a tight hug. I'm okay. Sarah stood, reading something in Ethan's expression. I should go, she said quietly. Marcus, it was fun hanging out with you today. Thanks for letting me stay, Miss Sarah. After she left, it was just the two of them, father and son, the family unit they'd been for 5 years. About to become something different, something bigger, something neither of them had prepared for. Dad? Marcus's voice was uncertain. What's wrong? You look weird. Ethan sat down on the couch, patting the cushion beside him. Come here, Marcus. We need to talk. Marcus settled onto the couch beside his father, his expression shifting from curiosity to concern as he registered the gravity in Ethan's eyes. Outside, the rain had diminished to a whisper against the windows, but inside the house, tension filled the air like electricity before a lightning strike. Is someone hurt? Marcus asked. Did something bad happen with the rescue? No, everyone's okay. Better than okay, actually. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to organize thoughts that refused to be organized. How did you begin a conversation that would rewrite your child's entire history? Marcus, do you remember much about your mom, about Rachel? The question seemed to catch Marcus off guard. They didn't talk about Rachel often. The grief had been too raw for too long, and then later it had felt like reopening old wounds. Marcus's face grew thoughtful. Some stuff. I remember she smelled like vanilla, and she used to sing me this song about stars when I couldn't sleep, and she had pretty eyes, kind of gold brown. He paused. Why? What if I told you that some of what we thought we knew about the day Mom died wasn't exactly true? Marcus's brow furrowed. What do you mean? The people I pulled from the river today. It was a woman named Claire and a little girl named Lila. Claire knew Mom, Marcus. She was Mom's cousin. And Lila, Ethan's voice caught. Lila is your sister. The words hung between them like a held breath. Marcus stared at his father, his 9-year-old mind visibly struggling to process what he'd just heard. I don't have a sister, Marcus said slowly. I'm an only child. You've said that like 1,000,000 times. I thought you were. I didn't know about Lila until today. But she's real, buddy. She's 4 years old and she's been living with Claire all this time, and she's your half-sister. But that doesn't make sense. Marcus's voice rose slightly, anxiety creeping in. Mom died before she could have another baby. The doctors said so. You told me the baby died with her. I know what I told you, and I believed it was true. But Marcus, Mom didn't die in that flood. Not right away. She survived and she had the baby, and then Ethan found himself unable to finish the sentence, unable to commit to either possibility, that Rachel was still alive somewhere or that she died years later, far from home. She survived? Marcus's eyes were huge. Mom was alive? Where was she? Why didn't she come home? Why didn't she come back to us? The hurt in his voice was like a knife to Ethan's heart. This was exactly what he'd feared. The confusion and pain of learning that the narrative they'd built their grief around was false. She was trying to protect us, Ethan explained gently. Mom had witnessed something bad, Marcus. Really bad. There were dangerous people who wanted to hurt her, and she was afraid they'd hurt us too if they knew we were connected to her. So she made it look like she died in the flood to keep us safe. That's stupid, Marcus's voice cracked. She should have told you. You could have protected her. You were in the Coast Guard. You saved people all the time. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stay away from the people you love, Ethan said. Even when it breaks your heart. Even when it's the hardest thing in the world. Mom made an impossible choice, and maybe it wasn't the right one, but she made it because she loved us. Marcus's eyes filled with tears. Is she still alive? Is Mom coming home? It was the question Ethan had been dreading because he didn't have an answer that wouldn't devastate his son. I don't know, buddy. Claire hasn't heard from her in 3 years. It's possible she's still out there, still trying to make things safe for us. But it's also possible that the bad people found her. So she might be dead for real this time. Yeah, she might be. Marcus turned away, his small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Ethan pulled him close, and the boy collapsed against his father's chest, crying with the raw grief of a child who just had an old wound torn open and a new one created simultaneously. I was just starting to be okay, Marcus choked out between sobs. I was starting to not think about her every single day, and now you're telling me she was alive the whole time, and maybe she's dead again, and I have a sister I never knew about, and nothing makes sense anymore. I know it doesn't make sense. I'm struggling with it too. They sat like that for a long time, father and son united in their confusion and grief, the storm outside finally breaking up to reveal patches of clear sky while a different kind of storm raged inside their home. Finally, Marcus pulled back, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. What's she like? He asked quietly. Lila, my sister. Ethan felt a flicker of hope in his chest. She's brave. She went into the river in a car crash and almost drowned, but she held on until I could get to her. She's got Mom's eyes, and she's been hearing stories about you her whole life. She's really excited to meet you. Stories about me? Claire told her all about her big brother Marcus, who loves dinosaurs and race cars. Lila's been wanting to meet you for as long as she can remember. Marcus processed this information, his tears slowing. Where is she now? At the hospital. They're keeping her overnight to make sure she's okay. I thought maybe tomorrow, if you're ready, we could go visit her together. Is she going to live with us? It was a practical question, the kind of detail-oriented thinking that Marcus had inherited from Rachel. Ethan realized he hadn't actually thought that far ahead, had been so caught up in the revelation of Lila's existence that he hadn't considered the logistics of what came next. I think so, he said. Claire's been taking care of her, but Claire's in danger too. The bad people who were after Mom are now after them. The safest place for Lila is with us, with her family. Do I have to share my room? The question was so normal, so typically 9-year-old, that Ethan almost laughed. No, buddy, we'll set up the guest room for her. It'll be her own space. Marcus nodded slowly, his mind clearly working through the implications. Is she going to call you Dad? She already does. She calls me Daddy. Something flickered across Marcus's face. Jealousy, maybe, or possessiveness. That's what I used to call you when I was little. You can still call me that if you want. Or Dad. Or whatever feels right. There's no rules about this, Marcus. We're all figuring it out as we go. Does she know about me? She knows all about you, and she really wants to be your sister. Marcus picked at a loose thread on the couch cushion, his expression troubled. What if I'm not good at being a big brother? What if she doesn't like me? Ethan's heart ached for his son, already anxious about living up to expectations in a situation none of them had chosen. You're going to be a great big brother. You're kind, you're smart, and you're brave. Lila's going to think you're the coolest person in the world. Did Mom talk about me? To Lila, I mean. Did she tell Lila stories about me? According to Claire, Mom talked about you all the time. About how proud she was of you, how much she loved you, Lila's grown up knowing she has this amazing brother waiting for her. Fresh tears spilled down Marcus's cheeks. "I wish Mom was here," he whispered. "I wish she could explain all this herself." "Me too, buddy. Me too." They sat together in the growing darkness, neither one moving to turn on the lights. Outside, the clouds were breaking apart, revealing a spectacular sunset, golden light streaming through gaps in the storm clouds, painting the flooded streets in shades of amber and rose. It seemed impossible that the world could be so beautiful when everything felt so chaotic. Ethan's borrowed phone buzzed, a text from Detective Morrison. "DNA results expedited due to circumstances. Should have preliminary results by morning. Need to speak with you ASAP about safety concerns." Safety concerns. The words sent a chill down Ethan's spine. He'd been so focused on the emotional bombshell of Lila's existence that he'd almost let himself forget about the danger Claire had described. Dalton Briggs and his organization were still out there, still a threat, possibly already looking for the little girl who represented evidence that could destroy them. "Marcus, I need to tell you something else," Ethan said carefully. "The bad people who are after Mom, they might be after Lila now too, which means they might come looking here." Marcus's eyes widened. "Are we in danger?" "I don't know yet, but we need to be careful. If you see anyone unusual hanging around, anyone watching the house, you need to tell me immediately. And you need to stay close to home for a while, okay? No wandering off to the creek or to friends' houses without telling me where you're going." "You're scaring me, Dad." "I don't mean to scare you. I just need you to understand that this is serious. We're going to figure it out, and we're going to keep everyone safe, but I need you to be aware and cautious." Marcus nodded, his face pale but determined. "Are we going to call the police?" "Already done. Detective Morrison is handling it. She's good at her job." "What about Lila? Is she safe at the hospital?" The question showed a maturity beyond Marcus's years, a concern for a sister he hadn't even met yet. "She's safe for now. Hospital security, police presence, and Claire is staying with her. Tomorrow we'll figure out a better long-term plan." They ordered pizza for dinner. Neither of them had the energy to cook, and ate in front of the TV, seeking the mindless comfort of animated movies. But Ethan couldn't focus on the screen. His mind kept circling back to the same questions. Where was Rachel? If she was alive, why hadn't she contacted Claire in 3 years? If she was dead, how had it happened? And what evidence had she hidden away that was worth killing for? Around 9 o'clock, Marcus fell asleep on the couch, emotionally exhausted from the revelations of the day. Ethan carried him upstairs and tucked him into bed, just like he'd done 1,000 times before. But tonight it felt different, weighted with the knowledge that their family dynamic was about to shift in ways neither of them could fully predict. Back downstairs, Ethan pulled out his laptop and started researching. Blessed Beginnings. Adoption Services had a professional-looking website, testimonials from happy families, photos of smiling babies and grateful parents. On the surface, it looked completely legitimate, but when Ethan dug deeper, searching for news articles or reviews or any independent verification of the organization's work, he found almost nothing. It was like the agency existed in a vacuum, visible enough to appear real, but insulated from any outside scrutiny. He searched for Dalton Briggs next. The man had a minimal online presence, a LinkedIn profile claiming he was a child welfare consultant, a few mentions in local business news, a photo from a charity gala standing next to Senator James Hartley. In the photo, Briggs was in his 50s, well-dressed, with the kind of bland handsomeness that made him instantly forgettable. The perfect cover for someone running a criminal operation. Ethan stared at that photo for a long time, memorizing the face. This was the man who'd forced Rachel into hiding. This was the man responsible for 5 years of grief and separation. This was the man who might have killed his wife. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Claire calling from the hospital. "Is everything okay?" Ethan answered immediately. "Is Lila's fine," Claire assured him quickly. "She's sleeping. I just wanted to check on you, see how things went with Marcus." About as well as could be expected. He's confused, hurt, but he's dealing with it. He wants to meet Lila tomorrow. "That's good. That's really good." Claire paused. "Ethan, there's something I need to tell you. After you left, I kept thinking about that safety deposit box." Rachel said something to me once right before she disappeared. She said if anything happened to her, I should look where the lilacs bloom. I thought it was just poetic language, you know? Rachel always talked like that. But now I'm wondering if it was a clue. Look where the lilacs bloom, Ethan repeated. Does that mean anything to you? Was there a specific place she loved with lilac bushes? That's the thing. I don't know. I didn't grow up here. I don't know Willow Creek or the surrounding areas, but you do. You and Rachel lived here for years before Marcus was born. Is there anywhere significant with lilacs? Ethan's mind raced through memories. The park where they used to picnic had some lilac bushes. So did the botanical garden on the east side of town. But neither of those places seemed significant enough to hide crucial evidence. Wait. The old cemetery, he said suddenly. There's a historic cemetery on the outskirts of town, Pioneer Rest. It's got this huge lilac grove that blooms every spring. Rachel used to love going there, said it was peaceful. We'd walk through it sometimes when she was pregnant with Marcus, planning our future, talking about the family we wanted to build. That could be it, Claire said excitedly. A cemetery would be the perfect place to hide something. Always open, rarely monitored, people coming and going all the time without drawing attention. But hide what? She gave you a safety deposit box key. Those are for banks, not cemeteries. Maybe the key is hidden in the cemetery? Or maybe there's a clue there that leads to the bank. Claire's voice was frustrated. I don't know, Ethan. I'm trying to think like Rachel, but Rachel's mind worked in ways I never fully understood. She was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. I'll check it out tomorrow, Ethan decided. After Marcus meets Lila, after I know you're both secure at the hospital, I'll go to Pioneer Rest and look around. Be careful. If I figured out Rachel's clue, Briggs might too. I'll bring Tom with me, safety in numbers. After they hung up, Ethan found himself unable to sleep. He paced the house, checking locks on doors and windows, peering out into the darkness for any sign of surveillance or threat. The street was quiet, most of the neighbors already in bed, the only sound the distant rush of the still swollen river. Around midnight, he heard footsteps on the stairs. Marcus appeared in the living room doorway, rubbing his eyes. Can't sleep? Ethan asked. Keep having weird dreams about Mom. Marcus came and sat beside his father on the couch. In one of them, she was at the grocery store, just shopping like normal, and I tried to talk to her, but she couldn't hear me. That sounds frustrating. Dad? Do you think she's really dead? Not the fake dead from before, but actually dead now? Ethan considered lying, offering false hope to ease his son's anxiety. But they'd had enough lies between them, even if those lies had been well-intentioned. Honestly, I think the odds are she is. 3 years with no contact when Claire says she used to check in regularly? That's not a good sign. But I also know your mom was incredibly resourceful. If anyone could survive and stay hidden for 3 years, it would be her. So there's still a chance. There's always a chance. Until we know for certain, there's always a chance. Marcus leaned against his father's shoulder. I'm scared about tomorrow. About meeting Lila. Why scared? What if she's disappointed? What if she's been imagining this perfect brother and I'm just me? Ethan wrapped his arm around Marcus's shoulders. You're not just anything. You're smart and kind and brave, and any sister would be lucky to have you. Lila's not expecting perfection. She's expecting someone who'll be there for her, who'll care about her. And you're already worried about disappointing her, which tells me you're exactly the kind of brother she needs. Do you think Mom would be proud of us? For taking care of Lila? The question nearly broke Ethan's heart. I think Mom would be more than proud. I think she'd be grateful beyond words. They sat together in the quiet house, father and son, preparing themselves for the morning when their family of 2 would become 3. Eventually, Marcus drifted back to sleep, and Ethan carried him upstairs again, marveling at how his son was both growing up too fast and still needed to be carried to bed. The sun rose over a transformed Willow Creek. The storm had passed, leaving behind pristine blue skies and air that smelled fresh and clean. The flooding was already receding, though debris and damage would take weeks to fully clean up. Ethan made breakfast, pancakes, Marcus's favorite, and they ate in companionable silence, both of them lost in their own thoughts about what the day would bring. Around 9 o'clock, Tom called. Morning. How'd it go with Marcus? Better than expected. He's scared but willing to meet Lila. We're heading to the hospital soon. Good. Listen, Morrison called me earlier. She wants to meet with you this afternoon, says she's got information about Briggs. And she also mentioned something about setting up protective surveillance on your house. I'll take whatever help she's offering. Tom, can you meet me at Pioneer Rest Cemetery around 2? I think Rachel might have hidden something there. The old cemetery? Why there? Ethan explained about Claire's clue and the lilac grove. Tom listened without interrupting, then let out a low whistle. If you're right, and there's evidence there that can take down Briggs, we need to be smart about this. We should bring Morrison. Not yet. Let me look first, see if there's anything to find. If I'm right, then we bring in the authorities. If I'm wrong, I don't want to waste the detective's time on a wild goose chase. Tom agreed reluctantly, and they made plans to meet that afternoon. After the call, Ethan went upstairs to find Marcus already dressed and attempting to comb his hair into something presentable. You look good, buddy, Ethan said from the doorway. I want to make a good impression. Marcus's voice was tight with nervousness. You're going to be great. The drive to County General Hospital felt simultaneously too long and too short. Marcus was silent in the passenger seat, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. When they pulled into the parking lot, he didn't move to unbuckle his seatbelt. What if she doesn't like me? He asked quietly. Shook it with solemn formality. Lila's been asking about you all morning. She's so excited to meet her big brother. Is she awake? Ethan asked. Wide awake and bouncing off the walls. The doctor already came by. She's cleared to be discharged this afternoon. Discharged to where? Ethan asked. We need to talk about living arrangements. Later, Claire said gently, glancing at Marcus. First things first. She led them into the room. Lila was sitting cross-legged on the hospital bed, still clutching River the bear, wearing hospital-issue pajamas that were several sizes too big. When she saw Ethan, her face lit up. Daddy! Then her eyes shifted to Marcus, and her expression transformed into something between hope and anxiety. Marcus? Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, staring at this little girl who was somehow his sister. Ethan could see him taking in the details, the hazel eyes, the dark curly hair, the shape of her face that did indeed echo Rachel's features. Recognition and disbelief warred on his face. Hi, Marcus managed finally. I'm Marcus. I know, Lila said, her voice shy now. I've seen pictures. Aunt Claire showed me lots of pictures. You're taller than I thought. You're smaller than I thought. It was such a typical kid observation that both adults had to suppress smiles. Lila patted the bed beside her. Do you want to sit? River wants to meet you. He's my bear. I got him from the nurses. Marcus glanced at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. Slowly, Marcus crossed the room and perched on the edge of the bed, leaving a careful distance between himself and his newfound sister. Nice bear, he said awkwardly. His name is River because that's where Daddy saved me. Do you like dinosaurs? Aunt Claire said you really like dinosaurs. Yeah, I guess. Dinosaurs are cool. I don't know much about dinosaurs. Maybe you could teach me? Marcus's expression softened slightly. There's this really good book about dinosaurs at our house. It has pictures and everything. If you want, I could show it to you. Our house? Lila's eyes were huge. Am I really going to live at your house with you and Daddy? Marcus looked at Ethan again, seeking confirmation. Ethan nodded. Yeah, Marcus said, his voice gaining confidence. You're going to live with us. We're family. The word seemed to settle something in Lila. Her shoulders relaxed and her smile grew wider. I've never had a family before. I mean, I had Aunt Claire, and she's great, but she's not really my family, you know? I know, Marcus said softly. I've never had a sister before either. Are you excited? I'm excited. I'm also kind of scared. What if I do something wrong? What if I break the rules? Then you'll get in trouble, just like everyone else. Marcus's voice held a hint of humor now. But Dad's pretty fair about rules. As long as you're not doing anything dangerous or mean, he's usually okay. They continued talking, the conversation growing easier as initial awkwardness faded. Ethan and Claire stepped into the hallway to give them space, both of them fighting back tears as they watched through the door window. They're going to be okay, Claire said. They're going to figure it out. We need to talk about you, Ethan said. Your living situation, your safety. You can't go back to Portland if Briggs's people know where you live. I know, I've been thinking about that. Claire twisted her hands together nervously. Ethan, I don't want to impose, but your family, Rachel's family, which makes you Marcus and Lila's family, which means you're not imposing. Ethan cut off her protest before she could voice it. We've got a guest room. It's small, but it's yours for as long as you need it. Claire's eyes filled with tears. You don't have to. Yes, I do. We're in this together now, all of us. Detective Morrison appeared at the end of the hallway, her expression serious. She approached them with purpose, and Ethan felt his stomach drop. Mr. Ward, Ms. Kohler, we need to talk. Morrison glanced through the window at the two children. Somewhere private. They found an empty consultation room down the hall. Morrison closed the door and pulled out a file folder. The DNA results came back, she said without preamble. Lila Ward is definitely your biological daughter, Mr. Ward. 99.99% probability. There's no question about paternity. Ethan had expected this confirmation, but hearing it officially still hit him like a wave. Okay, so what happens now? Now we have a bigger problem. Morrison opened the file, revealing surveillance photos. These were taken this morning outside the hospital. 3 men watching the entrance. We ran facial recognition. One of them is a known associate of Dalton Briggs. The photos showed 3 men in a dark sedan, faces partially obscured but visible enough for identification. They looked professional, dangerous, patient, the kind of men who waited for exactly the right moment to strike. They know she's here, Ethan said, his blood running cold. They know someone of interest is here. They may not specifically know it's Lila, but they're watching, which means we need to move carefully. Morrison looked at both of them. I've arranged for protective custody. We can move Lila and Ms. Kohler to a safe house, somewhere secure where— No. Ethan's voice was firm. I just found my daughter. I'm not letting her disappear into some safe house where I can't protect her. Mr. Ward, these are dangerous men. They've likely already killed one person, your wife, to protect their operation. They won't hesitate to come after Lila if they think she's a threat. Then we make sure they can't get to her. You said protective custody. Does that extend to my home? Can you provide security there? Morrison hesitated. It's not standard protocol, but given the circumstances, I can arrange for regular patrol presence. Maybe an officer stationed outside at night. That's not enough, Claire spoke up. Ethan, she's right. A safe house would be more secure. A safe house means Lila grows up afraid, separated from her family, never knowing stability. That's exactly what she's been living for 4 years. Ethan's voice was passionate now. I won't do that to her. We bring her home, we take precautions, and we end this. Morrison, you said Rachel had evidence against Briggs. We find that evidence, we bring him down, and then Lila is safe. Really safe. Not hiding in fear safe. And if they come after you while you're searching for evidence, then I deal with it. I was a rescue swimmer in rough seas. I can handle myself. Morrison studied him for a long moment. You're making this personal. It was always personal. These people hurt my family. They're not doing it again. Finally, Morrison nodded. All right, but we do this my way. Protective detail on your house starting tonight. You don't go anywhere without informing me. And if I say it's too dangerous, we move to Plan B. Safe house. No arguments. Agreed? Agreed. They returned to Lila's room to find the 2 children sitting side by side, looking at something on Marcus's phone. They were laughing together, and the sound was so normal, so beautifully ordinary, that Ethan felt his resolve strengthen. This was what they were fighting for, a chance at normal. The discharge paperwork took another hour to process, bureaucracy moving at its characteristic crawl despite the urgency thrumming through Ethan's veins. He kept glancing out the window, searching for any sign of the dark sedan Morrison had shown them in the photos. But the parking lot appeared normal. Families coming and going, the usual hospital traffic. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of invisible eyes tracking their every move. Lila was being remarkably patient for a 4-year-old, sitting quietly while nurses checked her vitals one final time and Claire signed what felt like endless forms. Marcus had appointed himself her protector, sitting close and explaining everything that was happening in hushed, serious tones. Watching them together, Ethan felt something shift in his chest, grief mixing with hope, loss transforming into possibility. "All set," the discharge nurse finally announced, handing Claire a folder of aftercare instructions. "Keep her warm, watch for any signs of respiratory distress, and follow up with her pediatrician in a week, though I'm guessing she doesn't have a regular doctor." "She will now," Ethan said firmly. "I'll get her established with Marcus's pediatrician as soon as possible." The nurse smiled, but there was something knowing in her expression, like she'd picked up on the unusual family dynamics at play. "You've got a brave little girl here, Mr. Ward. She's been through a lot, but kids are resilient. With the right support, she'll bounce back just fine." Morrison was waiting for them in the hallway, along with two uniformed officers Ethan didn't recognize. "We'll escort you to your vehicle," she said quietly. "These are Officers Chen and Rodriguez. They'll follow you home and do a security sweep of the property before we establish the protective detail schedule." "Is that really necessary?" Claire asked, glancing nervously at the children. "You'll scare them." "Better scared and safe than comfortable and dead," Morrison replied bluntly. Then, seeing Lila's wide eyes, she softened her tone. "We're just being extra careful, sweetheart, making sure you get home without any problems." They moved as a group through the hospital corridors, the two officers flanking them like bodyguards. Ethan carried Lila. She'd insisted she could walk, but he'd overruled her, needing the reassurance of holding his daughter close. She felt impossibly light in his arms, fragile in a way that made his protective instincts roar to life. Marcus walked beside Claire, his hand clutched tightly in hers, his eyes darting around nervously. The parking lot was bright with midday sun, the previous day's storm feeling like a distant memory. Ethan's truck was where he'd left it, muddy and battered from the rescue mission, but functional. He buckled Lila into the back seat, using the booster seat he'd hastily installed that morning after a panicked call to Tom asking where to buy emergency car seats. "This is your truck?" Lila asked, looking around with interest. "It's big. Big and tough, just like your dad," Marcus said, climbing in beside her. There was pride in his voice, the first hint of real connection between the siblings. "Wait until you see it with the plow attached in winter. Dad clears half the neighborhood's driveways." "What's a plow?" "I'll show you when we get home. We've got pictures from last year's big storm." The drive back to Willow Creek was tense despite the children's chatter. Ethan kept checking his mirrors, watching for any vehicle that might be following them. Officer Chen and Rodriguez stayed close in their patrol car, and Morrison followed in her unmarked sedan. 3 vehicles in convoy, and Ethan still didn't feel safe. Claire sat in the passenger seat, her face pale and drawn. "I never wanted this for her," she said quietly, pitched low enough that the kids couldn't hear over their conversation about winter storms and snow plows. 4 years of keeping her hidden, keeping her safe, and now we're driving her right into the open with armed guards. This is exactly what Rachel was trying to prevent. "Rachel was trying to prevent Lila from being hurt," Ethan corrected. "She succeeded. Lila's alive, healthy, and about to have a real home for the first time. That's not failure, Claire. That's Rachel's final gift to her daughter." "What if Briggs comes after her anyway? What if we can't protect her?" "Then we do what Rachel did. We fight. We adapt. We survive." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "But we do it together, as a family. No more hiding, no more running. We end this." The house looked exactly as it had when Ethan left that morning. A 2-story colonial with faded blue siding and a porch that needed painting, surrounded by overgrown shrubs Rachel had planted years ago. Ethan had meant to trim them back a dozen times, but had never found the motivation. Now he was grateful for them, the thick foliage providing natural cover and making it harder for anyone to approach the house unseen. Officers Chen and Rodriguez did a thorough sweep of the property, while Morrison positioned herself on the front porch, hand resting casually on her service weapon. Only after they'd cleared the interior and checked all the windows and locks did Morrison wave them inside. "We're good," she announced. "No signs of tampering or surveillance devices. I'll have a tech team come by later to do a more thorough electronic sweep, but for now, you're secure." Lila's eyes were huge as she stepped into the house, taking in the comfortable clutter of a home lived in by two males who weren't particularly concerned with interior design. Toys and books shared space with Coast Guard memorabilia and framed photos on every surface. Her gaze caught on one photo in particular, Rachel, heavily pregnant with Marcus, laughing at something off camera, her hand resting on her swollen belly. "That's Mommy," Lila whispered, moving closer to the photo. "She's so pretty." "She was beautiful," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. Inside and out, Marcus appeared at Lila's side. "That's right before I was born. Dad says she was really excited to meet me." "She told me about you," Lila said. "In the letters Aunt Claire read me, Mommy said you were the best thing that ever happened to her." Ethan's throat tightened. "Rachel kept writing letters for Lila?" Claire nodded. "She wrote one every month for the first 2 years. Then they stopped coming. I've saved all of them. 24 letters for Lila to read when she's older, when she can understand why her mother made the choices she made." The weight of those letters, those pieces of Rachel's heart preserved in ink and paper, was almost too much. Ethan had to turn away, focusing on the practical to keep from drowning in emotion. "Let me show you the guest room," he said to Claire. "And Lila, Marcus can show you his room and the one we're setting up for you." They split up, Marcus taking his sister upstairs with the solemn responsibility of a tour guide showing off a museum. Ethan could hear their voices drifting down, Marcus explaining the various dinosaur posters on his walls, Lila asking 1,000 questions with the boundless curiosity of a 4-year-old. The guest room was small and cluttered, filled with boxes Ethan had been meaning to sort through for years. He and Claire started clearing space, working in companionable silence, both of them acutely aware of Morrison's presence downstairs and the patrol car now parked conspicuously on the street outside. "Thank you," Claire said finally, "for all of this. You didn't have to take us in." "Yes, I did. Your family." Ethan moved a box of Rachel's old teaching materials, another thing he'd been unable to throw away. "Besides, Lila deserves stability. She deserves to know her family, to have a home that's actually hers. She's going to need therapy, professional help processing everything she's been through." Claire paused in folding a blanket. "I've done my best, but I'm not equipped to handle the trauma of what she's experienced. We'll get her whatever help she needs, therapy, counseling, whatever it takes." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. "Claire, I need to ask you something. The letters Rachel wrote, do they mention anything about where she was hiding? Any details about her life after she faked her death?" "Some. She was moving constantly, never staying in one place more than a few months. Las Vegas, Phoenix, Salt Lake City. Always big cities where she could blend in, where one more anonymous face didn't attract attention." Claire's expression grew distant with memory. "She worked cash jobs, waitressing, cleaning, nothing that required background checks. She said it was lonely but necessary, that every day away from Lila was agony, but the alternative was worse." "Did she ever mention finding concrete evidence against Briggs? Something that would finally let her come home?" In her last letter, the one from 3 years ago, she said she'd found something big. She didn't specify what, just that it was enough to destroy Briggs's entire operation. She said she was going to hand it over to a federal prosecutor she trusted, and then she'd be coming home. "That's the last thing I ever heard from her." Ethan's mind raced. "Who was the prosecutor? Did she give a name?" "No, she was paranoid about specifics in the letters, afraid they might be intercepted. But she did say the prosecutor was someone from before, someone who knew her from her old life. That could mean someone from Portland, where she grew up, or maybe from here in Willow Creek." "I'll talk to Morrison, see if she can track down federal prosecutors with connections to Rachel. If we can find out who Rachel was working with, maybe we can find out what happened to her." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "You really think she's still alive, don't you?" "I think we don't know for certain either way. And until we know for certain, I'm going to keep hoping. For Lila's sake, if nothing else. That little girl deserves the possibility that her mother might come home." They finished setting up the guest room, then moved to what had been Ethan's home office. A small room with a desk, filing cabinet, and pull-out couch that would need to be converted into Lila's bedroom. Marcus appeared in the doorway with his sister in tow. Dad, can Lila sleep in my room until we get hers set up? I've got the bunk bed and the top bunk is empty. Ethan glanced at Lila, who was practically vibrating with excitement at the prospect. Is that okay with you, sweetheart? Yes. I've never had a bunk bed before. Aunt Claire's apartments always had regular beds. All right then. Marcus, that's very mature of you to share your space. Ethan ruffled his son's hair. Let's get some lunch. Then we need to have a family meeting about some important things. Lunch was sandwiches and chips, simple comfort food eaten around the kitchen table. Morrison joined them, bringing with her a tablet displaying security camera footage from various angles of the house. I'm setting up a monitoring system, she explained. Nothing invasive, just exterior cameras, so we can see anyone approaching. The feed will go to my phone and to a security company we contract with. If anything unusual happens, we'll know immediately. How long is this going to last? Marcus asked, his voice small. The police outside, the cameras, all of it? Until we catch the people threatening your family, Morrison said honestly. Could be days, could be weeks. We're working on it. After lunch, Ethan gathered everyone in the living room. The two children sat on the couch, Claire in the armchair, Morrison standing near the door with her arms crossed. Ethan remained standing, needing the movement to organize his thoughts. Okay, family meeting time. Everyone needs to understand the situation we're in. He looked at each of them in turn. There are some very bad people who want to hurt Lila and Claire because they know things that could send these bad people to jail. The police are here to protect us, and we need to be smart about staying safe. Are they going to attack the house? Marcus asked, his voice steady despite the fear in his eyes. I don't know. Maybe. But we're going to be prepared if they do. That means following some new rules. Ethan ticked them off on his fingers. Nobody goes outside alone. Nobody opens the door unless I say it's okay. Nobody talks to strangers no matter how nice they seem. And if I tell you to do something, run, hide, whatever, you do it immediately without questions. Understood? Both children nodded solemnly. Lila raised her hand like she was in school. Yes, Lila? What if Mommy comes back? What if she comes to the door and we don't open it because we think she's a stranger? The question hit Ethan like a punch. He knelt in front of his daughter, taking her small hands in his. If Mommy comes back, she'll know how to prove who she is. She'll know things only Mommy would know. And I promise, if there's any chance it's her, I'll open that door. Okay? Okay. Lila's eyes were bright with unshed tears. I just don't want to miss her if she comes home. We won't miss her, I promise. Morrison cleared her throat. There's something else we need to discuss. Mr. Ward, Ms. Kohler mentioned you might have information about where Rachel hid evidence against Dalton Briggs. I need you to share anything you know. Ethan hesitated, glancing at Claire. They'd agreed not to mention the cemetery until they'd had a chance to search it themselves. But with Morrison directly asking, lying seemed both dangerous and stupid. Rachel left Claire a clue, he admitted, about looking where the lilacs bloom. There's a cemetery on the edge of town, Pioneer Rest, with a large lilac grove. I think that's where she hid something, either the evidence itself or information about where to find it. Morrison's expression sharpened. And you were planning to investigate this yourself? With Tom Chen's help, yes. This afternoon, actually. Absolutely not. If you're right about the cemetery, that's exactly the kind of place Briggs's people will be watching. You go stumbling in there alone, you're liable to get yourself killed. Then come with us. Bring backup if you need to, but we can't just sit here waiting for them to make the first move. Morrison considered this, her jaw working as she thought it through. All right, but we do this as an official police operation. I'll bring 2 additional officers. We'll go in unmarked vehicles, and you follow my lead. No heroics, no improvisation. Agreed? Agreed. They made plans to meet at the cemetery at 4 o'clock, giving Morrison time to coordinate with her team. In the meantime, Ethan tried to maintain some semblance of normalcy for the children. Marcus showed Lila his dinosaur book collection, and they spent an hour sprawled on the living room floor while Marcus explained the difference between carnivores and herbivores. Lila listened with rapt attention, asking questions that made Marcus puff up with the importance of being the knowledgeable older brother. Claire caught Ethan's eye and nodded toward the kitchen. They stepped away from the children, speaking in low voices. She's adjusting remarkably well, Claire observed. I was worried the transition would be harder. Kids are resilient. Plus, she's been waiting for this her whole life. To her, this is the happy ending she's been promised. Ethan leaned against the counter. Claire, I need you to promise me something. If things go bad at the cemetery, if Briggs's people are there and things get dangerous, you'll protect the kids no matter what. Ethan, don't talk like that. Promise me. Marcus and Lila are what matter. Not me, not you, not even finding Rachel or bringing down Briggs. Those two kids getting to grow up safe and happy, that's the only thing that matters. So promise me you'll protect them. Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. I promise. With my life if necessary. Good. Now let's hope it doesn't come to that. At 3:30, Tom arrived in his pickup truck, his expression grim. Morrison called me, explained the plan. I brought something you might need. He reached into the truck bed and pulled out a compact metal detector. Figured if we're treasure hunting in a cemetery, we might as well do it right. That's actually brilliant, Ethan admitted. If Rachel buried something, a metal detector will find it faster than manual searching. That's what I thought. Though I gotta say, this whole situation is insane. Yesterday we were filling sandbags, and today we're searching for evidence in a cemetery while dodging hired killers. Life comes at you fast. You might. They said goodbye to the kids. Marcus putting on a brave face, Lila clinging to Ethan's neck and making him promise to come back. Claire stood in the doorway with both children flanking her, and Ethan was struck by how much they already looked like a family. Broken and cobbled together from tragedy, maybe, but a family nonetheless. The drive to Pioneer Rest took 20 minutes, the cemetery located on a quiet country road outside town limits. It was an old cemetery, established in the 1800s when Willow Creek was still a frontier settlement. Weathered headstones dotted the gently rolling landscape, many of them tilted or crumbling with age. The lilac grove was at the far end of the property, a thick cluster of bushes that would be spectacular in spring bloom, but now looked dark and forbidding in the late afternoon light. Morrison was already there with officers Chen and Rodriguez from the hospital, plus a fourth officer Ethan didn't recognize. They'd parked their vehicles a quarter-mile away and approached on foot, trying to maintain a low profile. Here's the plan, Morrison said quietly, gathering them in a circle. We divide the grove into sections and search systematically. Mr. Ward, you and Tom take the north end with the metal detector. Officers Chen and Rodriguez take the south end. Officer Williams and I will hold perimeter and watch for any suspicious activity. We give this 2 hours max. If we haven't found anything by then, we regroup and come back with a larger team tomorrow. What if Briggs's people show up? Tom asked. Then you hit the ground and let us handle it. You're civilians, brave ones, but civilians. You're not equipped to handle armed confrontation. They spread out across the lilac grove, moving carefully between the bushes and old grave markers. The metal detector beeped occasionally. Old coins, buried hinges from long decomposed coffins, the detritus of a century and a half of interments. Ethan tried to think like Rachel, to imagine where she would have hidden something precious, somewhere memorable, somewhere she could find again even after years away, somewhere that meant something to them both. He found himself drawn to a specific area on the western edge of the grove, where a small stone bench sat beneath the largest lilac bush. They'd sat on that bench together once, years ago, when Rachel was about 6 months pregnant with Marcus. They'd talked about names and nursery colors and what kind of parents they wanted to be. It had been one of those perfect moments, suspended in amber in his memory before everything went wrong. Try here, Ethan said to Tom, pointing to the ground near the bench. Tom swept the metal detector across the area. It beeped strongly, the tone insistent. We've got something. Bigger than a coin, deeper than the others, maybe 18 inches down. They started digging, using small folding shovels Morrison had provided. The soil was soft from the recent rains, yielding easily. After 10 minutes of careful excavation, Tom's shovel hit something solid with a dull thunk. Got it, he breathed. They cleared away the remaining dirt to reveal a metal strongbox about the size of a shoebox, sealed with a combination lock. Etched into the lid in Rachel's distinctive handwriting was a single word. Lila. Ethan's hand shook as he lifted the box from its earthen hiding place. It was heavy, substantial, full of secrets that Rachel had died protecting. He was so focused on the box that he didn't hear the footsteps behind them until Tom suddenly grabbed his arm. "Ethan, we've got company." Ethan turned to find 3 men emerging from the trees at the far end of the grove. They were dressed in dark clothing, moving with the confident purposefulness of people who knew exactly what they were doing. One of them Ethan recognized from Morrison's surveillance photos, a known associate of Dalton Briggs. Morrison stepped forward, her badge already out, her voice carrying across the cemetery. "Oregon State Police, stop right there and identify yourselves." The men didn't stop. They spread out, flanking positions, hands moving toward concealed weapons. Behind them, more figures appeared. 4, 5, 6 men total. They'd been waiting, watching, and now they were closing the trap. "Get down!" Morrison shouted, drawing her weapon. "Everyone down now!" Tom and Ethan dropped behind the stone bench, the metal box clutched between them. Officers Chen, Rodriguez, and Williams had their weapons drawn, forming a defensive line between the civilians and the advancing men. The tension was suffocating, every second stretched tight as a wire about to snap. Then the leader of the group, the man from the surveillance photos, smiled. It was a cold, professional smile that made Ethan's blood run cold. "Detective Morrison," the man said, his voice cultured and calm. "I don't think you want to do this. Check your phone. I think you'll find you have a message that's rather time-sensitive." Morrison's face paled. She pulled out her phone with her free hand, keeping her weapon trained on the men. Whatever she saw on the screen made her curse viciously. "What is it?" Officer Chen asked without taking his eyes off the threat. "They have Lila and Marcus," Morrison said, her voice hollow with shock. "Claire, too. They're holding them hostage at Ward's house unless we hand over the box." The world seemed to tilt beneath Ethan's feet. His children, both his children, in the hands of these monsters. The box suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, its metal surface cold and accusatory against his chest. "We need to go," he said, his voice shaking with barely contained rage. "We need to get to my house right now." "They want the box first," Morrison said. "They're saying if we don't hand it over in the next 10 minutes, they start hurting the children." The leader's smile widened. "My employer is a reasonable man, Detective. He doesn't want to hurt children. He just wants what belongs to him, the evidence that was stolen from his organization. Give us the box and everyone goes home safe. Simple transaction." "You're lying," Ethan snarled. "You'll kill them anyway. Cover your tracks." "Perhaps. But what choice do you have? Refuse and they definitely die. Cooperate and they might live. Those are your options, Mr. Ward." Tom's hand clamped on Ethan's shoulder, holding him back from doing something stupid. "Think," Tom hissed. "Don't react. Think." Morrison was speaking rapidly into her radio, calling for backup, requesting units to Ethan's address. But backup would take time they didn't have, time measured in his children's lives. "We can't give them the box," Morrison said firmly. "Whatever's in there is the only leverage we have. If we hand it over, we've got nothing to bargain with. My kids are at home with armed men threatening to hurt them." Ethan's voice rose despite his attempt at control. "I don't give a damn about leverage." "Ethan, listen to me." Morrison gripped his arm. "If we give them the box now, they have no reason to keep the children alive. They'll eliminate the witnesses and disappear. But if we can get to the house, if we can negotiate with the box as leverage, we might be able to save them." "Might isn't good enough. It's all we've got." The leader of the group checked his watch with theatrical precision. 9 minutes now, Detective. I'd suggest you make a decision quickly. My associates at the house are not known for their patience." Ethan looked down at the box in his hands. Rachel's legacy, the evidence she'd died collecting, the key to bringing down the entire operation. Against that, he weighed the faces of his children. Marcus, with his serious eyes and brave heart. Lila, with her infectious smile and desperate need for safety. There was no contest. There was never any contest. "We give them the box," Ethan said. "We give it to them right now, and they call off their people at the house." "Mr. Ward." "That's not negotiable, Morrison. They're my kids. My daughter, who I just found yesterday. My son, who's been through enough trauma for a lifetime. I won't gamble their lives on maybe being able to negotiate." Morrison's face was anguished, torn between duty and compassion. If we give them the box, everything Rachel died for is gone. All her work, all her sacrifice. Rachel sacrificed everything to protect her children. Ethan's voice cracked. She gave up her life, her family, everything she loved to keep them safe. You think she'd want me to choose some evidence over Lila and Marcus's lives? She'd burn the whole world down to protect them. And so will I. The cemetery fell silent except for the whisper of wind through the lilac bushes. Morrison stared at Ethan, seeing the absolute certainty in his eyes, understanding that no argument would sway him. "All right," she said finally, her voice heavy with resignation. "But we do it smart. We make them call off the house first, confirm the children are safe, and then we hand over the box. Not before." The leader shrugged. "Fair enough. I'll call my associates, tell them to stand down." He pulled out a phone, made a brief call, then held the phone out toward them. "Here. Speak to your children, Mr. Ward. Confirm they're unharmed." Ethan strode forward, Morrison covering him with her weapon. He took the phone with shaking hands. "Hello? Dad?" Marcus's voice was thin with fear but steady. "Dad, there are bad men here. They have guns. They said they'd hurt Lila if we didn't cooperate." "Are you okay, buddy? Is everyone okay?" "We're okay. Scared, but okay. Claire's here too. They made us sit in the living room and—" The phone was pulled away. The leader pocketed it smoothly. "Satisfied? Now the box, please." Ethan looked at Morrison one last time, giving her a chance to override him, to play the authority card and refuse. She closed her eyes briefly, then nodded. "Do it," she said quietly. Ethan walked forward and placed the metal box in the leader's outstretched hands. The man's smile was triumphant as he examined it, verifying the combination lock was still intact. "Pleasure doing business with you, Detective. Now, if you'll excuse us—" "The children," Morrison interrupted. "Call your people. Tell them to leave the house immediately." "Of course." The leader made another call, speaking in low tones that Ethan couldn't make out. Then he pocketed his phone and nodded to his men. "We're done here. The children are safe, Detective. Though I'd suggest you hurry home anyway. I believe one of them was quite distressed." The men melted back into the trees, disappearing as quickly as they'd appeared. For a moment no one moved, everyone frozen in the aftermath of the confrontation. Then Ethan broke into a run. He sprinted through the cemetery, Morrison and the others right behind him. They piled into vehicles and tore down the country road toward town, sirens blaring, lights flashing. Ethan's heart was hammering so hard he thought it might burst through his ribs. The drive felt eternal, every second an agony of not knowing, of imagining worst-case scenarios. When they finally screeched to a stop in front of his house, the scene looked eerily normal. No signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no indication of violence. But the front door was standing open, and that alone was wrong enough to send ice through Ethan's veins. He bolted from the car before it fully stopped, Morrison shouting at him to wait, to let the officers clear the house first. But Ethan couldn't wait, couldn't stand still while his children might be hurt inside. He burst through the front door, his eyes frantically scanning the living room. Marcus and Lila were huddled together on the couch, wrapped in each other's arms, both crying. Claire sat beside them, her face streaked with tears, a bruise already forming on her cheek. But they were alive. They were whole. "Dad!" Marcus launched himself at Ethan, Lila right behind him. Both children crashed into him with enough force to nearly knock him over, their small bodies shaking with sobs. Ethan sank to his knees and wrapped his arms around them both, holding them so tight it probably hurt, not caring. "You're okay," he said over and over, a mantra and a prayer. "You're okay. You're safe. I've got you." "They were so scary," Lila sobbed into his shoulder. "They had guns, and they said mean things, and one of them grabbed Aunt Claire. Shh, it's over now. They're gone. You're safe." Morrison and her officers swept through the house, verifying it was clear, but Ethan barely registered their presence. His entire world had contracted to the feeling of his children in his arms, the sound of their breathing, the proof that they'd survived. Claire approached slowly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she said brokenly. "They came in through the back door, picked the lock. I tried to stop them, but there were too many. They said if we fought, If we tried to call for help, they'd hurt the kids. I didn't know what to do. You protected them, Ethan said firmly, reaching out to pull her into the embrace. You kept them alive and safe. That's all that matters. They stayed like that for a long time, a tangle of arms and tears and relief, while Morrison coordinated with her team and called for additional units to canvass the neighborhood. Eventually, the children's sobs subsided into hiccups and sniffles. Ethan carried Lila to the couch and sat with both kids tucked against his sides. Claire perched on the arm of the couch, with her hand resting protectively on Marcus's shoulder. Morrison approached, her expression grim. They're gone. No signs of where they went, and I'm betting they were smart enough to ditch their vehicles and switch cars. We'll check traffic cameras, but don't hold your breath. They have the box, Ethan said flatly. They have everything Rachel died for. Actually, they don't. Morrison pulled something from her jacket pocket, a small USB drive. While you were digging, while everyone was focused on the metal box, I did a quick search of my own. Found this taped to the underside of that stone bench. I think Rachel was smarter than we gave her credit for. The box might have been a decoy or insurance, but this... She held up the drive. This feels like the real treasure. Hope flared in Ethan's chest. You think that's the evidence? Only one way to find out. I'll take it back to the station, have our tech guys see what's on it. Morrison paused. For what it's worth, you made the right call. The kids are safe. That's what matters. Is it over? Marcus asked, his voice small. Are the bad men going to leave us alone now? Morrison's hesitation was answer enough. We don't know yet, sweetheart, but we're going to do everything we can to keep you safe. After Morrison and her team left, Ethan ordered pizza for dinner. Comfort food seemed called for after the day's trauma. The four of them ate in the living room, nobody wanting to be alone, everybody seeking the reassurance of proximity. Lila fell asleep halfway through her second slice, exhausted by fear and relief in equal measure. Marcus wasn't far behind, his eyes drooping even as he fought to stay awake. Ethan carried them both upstairs and tucked them into Marcus's bunk bed, Lila on bottom, Marcus on top, where he could keep watch over his little sister. As he kissed them goodnight, Marcus grabbed his hand. Dad, are you going to leave to go help the police find the bad men? Nobody. I'm staying right here. I'm not leaving you guys again. Promise? Promise. Downstairs, Claire had cleaned up the pizza boxes and was staring out the living room window at the patrol car stationed in front of the house. We can't keep living like this, she said when Ethan joined her. Always looking over our shoulders. Always afraid. We won't have to. Once Morrison sees what's on that USB drive, once we know what Rachel found, we'll have a way to end this. And if what's on the drive isn't enough, if it's encrypted or damaged or not what we hoped, then we figure out Plan B. Ethan's voice was firm. But we don't give up. We don't let Briggs win. Rachel didn't sacrifice everything just so her children could live in fear. Claire turned to face him, and in the dim light from the street, she looked heartbreakingly like Rachel. Same bone structure, same determined set to her jaw. She'd be proud of you, you know, Rachel. The way you've stepped up for Lila, the way you're fighting for this family. She always said you were the best man she'd ever known. I see now why she believed that. Before Ethan could respond, his phone rang. Morrison's name flashed on the screen. Ward, he answered. We opened the USB drive, Morrison said without preamble. Ethan, it's everything. Financial records, communications, transaction logs going back 6 years. Rachel documented every illegal adoption, every bribe, every falsified document. She's got Senator Hartley, 3 judges, half a dozen social workers, and Dalton Briggs himself dead to rights. Ethan's knees went weak with relief. So we've got him. We can bring him down. We've got all of them. I've already contacted the FBI. They're sending a team from Portland tonight. By morning, we'll have warrants for everyone involved. Morrison paused. Rachel was meticulous, Ethan. She knew exactly what evidence she needed to make charges stick. This is airtight. So it's over. The investigation's just beginning, but yeah, for your family, the danger's over. Once we start making arrests in the morning, Briggs and his people will be too busy trying to save themselves to worry about you. The kids are safe. After he hung up, Ethan delivered the news to Claire. She collapsed into the nearest chair, her body finally releasing the tension she'd been carrying for years. It's really over, she whispered. Rachel did it. She actually did it. She saved them all, Ethan agreed. Every child those monsters took, every family they destroyed, Rachel's evidence is going to bring them justice. I just wish she could see it. Wish she could know that her sacrifice meant something. Ethan thought about that for a long time after Claire went upstairs to bed. He sat alone in the dark living room, listening to the creaks of the house settling, the distant sound of his children's breathing from upstairs. Tomorrow would bring arrests and media attention and the beginning of justice. But tonight was just for them, a family cobbled together from loss and secrets and second chances. He pulled out his phone and looked at the lock screen photo. Him and Marcus at the beach last summer, both of them grinning at the camera, blissfully unaware of how their world was about to expand. Tomorrow he'd update that photo to include Lila and Claire, a new family portrait for a new reality. Outside, dawn was still hours away, but Ethan could feel the darkness lifting. Not completely. There were still questions about Rachel's fate, still grief to process, and trauma to heal. But for the first time in 5 years, the future held something other than just survival. It held hope. Morning broke over Willow Creek with the kind of crystalline clarity that only comes after storms have washed the world clean. Sunlight streamed through the living room windows where Ethan had eventually dozed off in the armchair, too wired to sleep properly, but too exhausted to stay fully awake. He woke to the sound of small feet padding down the stairs and opened his eyes to find Lila standing in front of him, clutching River the bear and studying his face with those heartbreaking hazel eyes. "You stayed," she said softly, like she'd been afraid he wouldn't. "I promised, didn't I?" Ethan sat up, his back protesting the night spent in the chair. "How'd you sleep, sweetheart?" "Okay." Marcus snores. She climbed into his lap without asking permission, curling up against his chest with the easy trust of a child who'd decided he was safe. "Are the bad men really gone?" "The police are arresting them right now. By the end of today, they'll all be in jail where they can't hurt anyone anymore. Even the one who scared Aunt Claire? Especially him." Lila was quiet for a moment, her small fingers tracing patterns on River's worn fur. "Daddy, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Do you think Mommy knows that we're safe now? That her plan worked?" The question lodged in Ethan's throat like a stone. How did you answer a 4-year-old's theological inquiry about whether the dead could watch over the living? How did you explain hope and faith and the desperate human need to believe that sacrifice meant something? "I think if your mom can see us, she's very proud right now," Ethan said carefully. "She fought so hard to protect you, and now you get to grow up safe and loved. That's all she ever wanted. I wish I could tell her thank you for saving me, for giving me to you." Lila's voice was achingly mature for someone so young. "Aunt Claire says I should talk to her sometimes, like she's still listening. Do you think she is?" "I think your mom loved you so much that a little thing like death couldn't stop her from watching over you. So yeah, I think she's listening." Lila seemed satisfied with this answer. She snuggled deeper into Ethan's embrace and within minutes had drifted back to sleep, the resilience of childhood allowing her to find peace even in the aftermath of trauma. Ethan held her and watched the morning light paint gold across the room, marveling at how quickly his world had transformed. 3 days ago, he'd been a widowed single father going through the motions of life. Now he was the father of 2, guardian to his late wife's cousin, and sitting at the center of a criminal investigation that would probably make national news. Claire appeared in the doorway, her hair still disheveled from sleep, the bruise on her cheek darker this morning but already beginning to yellow at the edges. "Is she okay?" "She's asking hard questions, but yeah, she's okay. Kids are tougher than we think." "Marcus is still out cold upstairs. I checked on him. He's wrapped around 6 stuffed animals like they're a shield." Claire's smile was fond. "He's a good boy, Ethan. You've raised him well." "I've done my best. Not sure Rachel would approve of some of my parenting shortcuts, but we've survived." "Rachel would be proud of both of you." Claire moved to the window, watching the patrol car still stationed outside. "Morrison called my phone a few minutes ago. I saw the missed calls and didn't want to wake you. She left a voicemail saying they've made 4 arrests already this morning. Dalton Briggs was one of them. They picked him up at his home in Portland at 6 a.m. Ethan felt a savage satisfaction at the news. "Good. I hope they throw away the key. Morrison also said we should expect media attention. The story's going to break by noon. State senator implicated in adoption trafficking scandal. Widow's evidence brings down criminal empire. They're calling it the biggest adoption fraud case in Oregon history. Claire's voice was hollow. Rachel's name is going to be everywhere. Her story, her sacrifice, all of it public. Is that what you're worried about? The publicity? I'm worried about what it means for Lila, for Marcus. They're going to grow up knowing their mother died fighting criminals, that she gave up her life to expose corruption. That's a heavy legacy to carry. It's also a legacy of courage and love, Ethan countered. Yeah, it's complicated. Yeah, there are going to be hard conversations and therapy sessions and moments when they resent what Rachel did. But they'll also grow up knowing their mother was a hero, that she looked at evil and refused to turn away. There are worse legacies to inherit. Claire wiped at her eyes. When did you become so wise? About 3 days ago, when I jumped into a river and pulled my entire future out of the water. The moment of levity broke some of the tension. Claire laughed, the sound watery but genuine. Rachel used to say you had a terrible sense of humor. I'm starting to see what she meant. They made breakfast together, pancakes and bacon, because it felt like a celebration was warranted. Marcus stumbled downstairs around 8, looking rumpled and confused until he saw Lila asleep in the armchair and his father cooking at the stove. Then his face cleared, memory returning, and with it a tentative smile. So it wasn't a dream, he said. I really have a sister. You really have a sister, Ethan confirmed. And an aunt, and a dad who's apparently terrible at cooking pancakes because these are all turning out lopsided. I'll help. Marcus washed his hands and joined him at the stove, falling into their familiar breakfast routine. But there was something different in his bearing now, a confidence that hadn't been there before. Yesterday's crisis had forced him to grow up fast, to step into the role of protector and big brother. He'd risen to the challenge, and the knowledge of that was visible in the set of his shoulders. They were halfway through breakfast when Detective Morrison arrived, accompanied by a woman in a dark suit who introduced herself as Special Agent Catherine Reeves from the FBI. They declined coffee, but accepted the invitation to sit at the kitchen table, spreading out folders and tablets with the efficient movements of people who'd been awake for hours. We've made significant progress overnight, Agent Reeves began, her voice crisp and professional. Based on the evidence your wife compiled, we've executed warrants on 12 individuals so far. Dalton Briggs, Senator Hartley, 3 family court judges, 6 social workers, and 2 physicians who falsified medical records. We expect to make at least 8 more arrests by the end of the week. How many children? Ethan asked. How many kids were trafficked through this operation? Reeves's expression darkened. We're still compiling the full list, but preliminary estimates suggest at least 47 children over the past 8 years. Some were adopted by couples who had no idea the process was illegal. They thought they were going through legitimate channels. Others were sold to buyers who specifically wanted to avoid scrutiny. We're working to trace every child, verify their welfare, and determine appropriate next steps. The number hit Ethan like a physical blow. 47 children. 47 families destroyed or built on lies. The scope of Briggs's operation was staggering. Rachel's documentation is going to make prosecution straightforward, Morrison added. She kept meticulous records, dates, names, dollar amounts, communications. Defense attorneys are going to have a hard time arguing their way out of this one. What about Rachel? Claire asked quietly. Have you found any evidence of what happened to her? The 2 law enforcement officers exchanged glances. Agent Reeves pulled out another folder, this one thinner than the others. We've been investigating your cousin's disappearance as part of the broader case. According to financial records we uncovered, Dalton Briggs made a payment of $50,000 to a known contract killer 3 years ago, around the same time Rachel Ward stopped communicating with you. The killer is currently serving time in California for an unrelated murder. We've arranged for him to be interviewed this afternoon. Claire's hand flew to her mouth. So she's really dead. Rachel's really gone. We don't know that for certain yet, Reeves cautioned. But I'll be honest with you, the circumstantial evidence isn't encouraging. A payment to a professional, complete communication blackout, no activity on any of her known aliases. It suggests a targeted hit. Ethan felt the last thread of hope he'd been clinging to begin to fray. He'd wanted to believe that Rachel was out there somewhere, that she'd simply gone so deep undercover that even Claire couldn't reach her. But the stark reality of financial records and professional killers was harder to rationalize away. If the killer confirms it, will there be remains to recover? Ethan asked, surprised by how steady his voice was. Will we be able to bring her home? We'll ask, Morrison said gently. But these people rarely leave evidence behind. I'm sorry, Ethan. I wish I had better news. After the agents left, the house fell into a heavy silence. Even the children, who'd been listening from the doorway without the adults noticing, seemed subdued by the confirmation of what they'd all suspected but hoped wasn't true. Rachel was gone. Not hiding, not deep undercover, not waiting for the right moment to return. Just gone. Claire excused herself to the guest room, her composure finally cracking. Marcus and Lila gravitated to Ethan, flanking him on the couch, both seeking comfort in his presence. He wrapped an arm around each of them and tried to find words that would make sense of senseless loss. Your mom was the bravest person I ever knew, he said finally. She saw people being hurt, and she decided to do something about it, even though it cost her everything. That's real courage. Not the kind you see in movies, but the kind that changes the world. I wish I could remember her better, Marcus said, his voice thick with unshed tears. I have pictures and stories, but I want real memories. I want to remember what her voice sounded like, how she smelled, the way she laughed. But it's all fading. I never got to know her at all, Lila added, her small voice breaking. I have letters and pictures, but I don't have a single memory of my own mom. That's not fair. Ethan's heart shattered for both of them. No, it's not fair. None of this is fair. But you know what? You're both alive because of the choices she made. Every day you grow up safe and happy is Rachel's gift to you. And yeah, you can be angry that she's not here to see it. Yeah, you can grieve what you've lost, but don't ever think she didn't love you enough to stay. She loved you so much that she was willing to die to keep you safe. That's how much you mattered to her. Will we forget her completely? Lila asked. When I'm grown up, will I forget that I ever had a mother? No, sweetheart, we won't let you forget. We'll tell you stories, show you pictures, read you the letters she wrote. We'll make sure you know exactly who Rachel Ward was, the good and the complicated and everything in between. Your mom will always be part of this family, even if she can't be here physically. They sat together for a long time, sharing grief and comfort in equal measure. Eventually, Claire rejoined them, her eyes red but her spine straight, and they began the process of figuring out what came next. Practical matters. Enrolling Lila in preschool, setting up therapy appointments for both children, deciding how to handle media inquiries when the story inevitably broke. Life had to continue even in the shadow of loss, and they were all learning how to navigate this strange new reality. The media circus descended that afternoon just as Morrison had predicted. News vans lined the street, reporters jockeying for position, cameras pointing at the house like accusatory fingers. Ethan closed the curtains and ignored the doorbell, refusing to feed the frenzy. The story would come out regardless. Brave widow exposes corruption, sacrifices self to save children, evidence brings down powerful senator. It was the kind of narrative that would dominate headlines for weeks, spawning think pieces and true crime podcasts and probably a Lifetime movie within a year. But inside the house, away from the cameras and the questions, they were just a family trying to figure out how to be a family. Marcus taught Lila how to play his favorite video game, patiently explaining the controls a dozen times, while she button-mashed with enthusiastic incompetence. Claire made dinner, actual home-cooked dinner, not pizza or takeout, and the smell of roasting chicken filled the house with the warmth of normalcy. Ethan fielded phone calls from Tom and Sarah and other concerned friends, assuring them that yes, they were okay. No, they didn't need anything right now. Thank you for checking. Around 7 that evening, Agent Reeves called with an update. The contract killer had talked. In exchange for consideration on his sentence, he'd admitted to being hired by Briggs to eliminate Rachel Ward 3 years ago. He'd tracked her to a motel in Sacramento, waited for his moment, and made it look like a random mugging gone wrong. Her body had been cremated under a false name and the ashes scattered in the Sacramento River. There would be no remains to recover, no grave to visit, no closure beyond the killer's confession. Ethan delivered this news to Claire after the children were in bed. She took it stoically, having already mourned Rachel once and learned how to carry that grief. "At least we know," she said. "At least we're not wondering anymore." "Does it help? Knowing?" "A little. Maybe." Claire looked at the ceiling toward the room where both children were sleeping. "She bought them safety with her life, Ethan. 47 children are going to get justice because Rachel refused to stay silent. That has to count for something." "It counts for everything," Ethan agreed, "but it still hurts like hell." "Yeah, it really does." The next few weeks blurred together in a cascade of appointments and adjustments. Both children started therapy, Marcus with a counselor who specialized in grief and family trauma, Lila with a play therapist who could help her process the chaotic first 4 years of her life. Claire enrolled in a victim's assistance program to help her work through her own trauma from years of living in fear. Ethan found himself in a support group for single parents, though he struggled to articulate his specific situation. Yes, he was a widower, but his wife had died twice, 5 years apart, and he'd only just discovered he had a second child. The other parents looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language. The legal proceedings against Briggs and his co-conspirators moved forward with surprising speed. Agent Reeves kept them updated. Grand jury indictments, denied bail motions, plea bargain attempts that were rejected. Senator Hartley resigned in disgrace, his political career destroyed. The adoption agency was shut down, its assets seized. Families were notified that their adoptions might have been illegal, sending shockwaves through communities across 3 states. Through it all, the Ward family, because that's what they'd become, officially and irrevocably, learned how to be together. Marcus and Lila's initial awkwardness evolved into genuine sibling affection, complete with bickering over toys and competition for Ethan's attention. Claire found a job at the local library and started looking at apartments in town, though Ethan kept insisting she should stay as long as she needed. The house that had felt too empty with just him and Marcus now felt alive with voices and laughter and the beautiful chaos of a full family. 2 months after that fateful rescue in the river, Ethan received a call from Morrison asking him to come to the station. She had something to show him, she said, something Rachel would have wanted him to see. He made the drive alone, leaving the children with Claire, unsure what to expect. Morrison led him to a conference room where a laptop sat open on the table. Rachel's USB drive didn't just contain evidence, she explained. There were also personal files, video diaries she recorded over the years. The FBI's finished reviewing them for evidence, and Agent Reeves agreed you should have copies. She pressed play on the first video. Rachel's face filled the screen, older than Ethan remembered, thinner, with shadows under her eyes and stress lines around her mouth, but unmistakably, heartbreakingly Rachel. "Hi, baby," Rachel's recorded voice said, and Ethan's breath caught. "It's me. It's July 15th, and Lila is 6 months old today. She's sleeping in the next room, and I can hear her breathing through the baby monitor, and it's the most beautiful sound in the world." The video was dated 4.5 years ago, filmed in some anonymous motel room. Rachel sat on the edge of a bed, the camera propped on a dresser, and talked directly to whoever she imagined might watch this someday. "I need to tell you some things, just in case I don't make it back, in case the worst happens, and you're watching this trying to understand why I did what I did." Rachel's voice was steady, but her eyes glistened with tears. "Ethan, if you're seeing this, it means you found our daughter. It means Claire kept her promise and brought Lila home to you. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to see it. Sorry I couldn't watch you meet her, watch her realize that all the stories about her daddy were true." Ethan's vision blurred. Morrison quietly left the room, giving him privacy with this ghost of his wife. "I know you must be angry," Rachel continued. "I know you must feel betrayed that I let you think I was dead, that I kept this huge secret from you. You have every right to be furious. But Ethan, I need you to understand there was no other way. Briggs would have killed you and Marcus if he'd known I was alive. He would have used you to get to me, and I couldn't let that happen. So I died. I let you mourn me. I let our son grow up without his mother, and I hate myself for it every single day." She paused, wiping at her eyes. "But I'd do it again. I'd make the same choice 1,000 times over, because you and Marcus and Lila getting to live is worth any price. Even if that price is me." The video continued, Rachel talking about Lila's first smile, first laugh, first tooth. Mundane moments of motherhood recorded for a husband who might never see them, for a daughter who might never remember. There were dozens of videos, Morrison had said, years' worth of documentation. Rachel's lonely vigil, her solo parenting, her desperate hope that one day it would be safe to come home. "I'm close, baby," Rachel said in what appeared to be one of the later videos, her hair cut short now, her face gaunt with exhaustion. "I've almost got everything I need to bury Briggs for good. Another few months, maybe 6, and I can turn it all over to the feds and come home. I can meet my son again. I can introduce him to his sister. We can be a family again." But that video was dated 3 years ago, shortly before she disappeared for the final time. Shortly before Briggs's hired killer found her in Sacramento and ensured she'd never make it home. Ethan watched every video Morrison had given him access to, 4 hours of Rachel's secret life, her love letters to a family she'd sacrificed everything to protect. By the time the last video ended, his face was wet with tears, but his heart felt somehow lighter. Rachel had never stopped fighting to come home. She'd never stopped loving them. And in her own way, through Lila and the evidence that would save dozens of children, she'd succeeded. He drove home in the gathering dusk, the laptop containing Rachel's videos carefully secured in the passenger seat. When he walked through the door, he found organized chaos. Claire cooking dinner while Marcus and Lila ran circles around the living room in some elaborate game that seemed to involve dinosaurs and princesses teaming up to fight bad guys. It was loud and messy and absolutely perfect. "Daddy!" Lila spotted him and launched herself into his arms. "We're playing rescue. I'm the princess who got captured by the dragon, and Marcus is the dinosaur who saves me, and then we team up to rescue the other dinosaurs." "Sounds like an excellent plan," Ethan said, kissing the top of her head. "Does the rescue mission have time for dinner first? Can we have mac and cheese? I think Aunt Claire's making something more nutritious, but we'll see what we can negotiate." Marcus appeared at his elbow. "Dad?" Tom called. "He wants to know if we want to come over this weekend for a barbecue. Can we go?" "Sure, buddy. We'll make it a family outing." "Cool. Sarah's going to be there too. She keeps asking me about Lila, wants to meet her." "Then it's definitely time for introductions." Ethan set Lila down and watched her immediately resume the rescue game. "Marcus, come here for a second. I need to tell you something." They moved to the kitchen where Claire was draining pasta, giving them the illusion of privacy while she tactfully focused on dinner. Ethan knelt so he was eye level with his son. "I saw some videos today, videos your mom made before she died. She talked about you, about how proud she was of you, about how much she loved you. I'm going to show them to you when you're ready, when you want to see them. No rush, no pressure. But they're there whenever you want to hear her voice again." Marcus's eyes went wide. "Really? You can hear her talking?" "Really? And Marcus, she said some things I think you need to hear, about why she did what she did, about how much it hurt her to be away from us. I think it might help you understand. Can I see them tonight?" Ethan considered this. The videos were raw and emotional, and Marcus had school tomorrow. But he also saw the desperate need in his son's eyes, the hunger for connection with a mother who'd been more ghost than person for most of his memory. "Let's watch one after dinner," he decided. "Just one, and then we'll take it slow. These videos are a gift, but they're also hard. We need to be careful with them." Dinner was chaotic and warm, everyone talking over each other, Lila needing 3 reminders to actually eat her food instead of narrating its adventures on her plate. Afterwards, Ethan set up the laptop in the living room and queued up one of the earlier videos, one where Rachel was talking about Marcus specifically, about his 3rd birthday that she'd missed. "My baby is 3 years old today," Rachel said from the screen, "and I'm 1,000 miles away eating gas station birthday cake alone in my car. Ethan, please tell him happy birthday from me. Tell him his mama loves him bigger than the sky and deeper than the ocean. Tell him I'm coming home as soon as I can." Marcus watched with laser focus, his hand gripping Ethan's tightly. When the video ended, he was crying quietly, tears streaming down his face, but he was also smiling. "She remembered," he whispered. "She was thinking about me." "She thought about you every single day," Ethan assured him. "You and Lila both. You were the reason she kept fighting." That night, after both children were asleep and Claire had retired to the guest room, Ethan sat alone on the porch and looked up at the stars. The night was clear, the kind of crystalline darkness that made the universe feel both impossibly vast and intimately close. Somewhere up there, he liked to think Rachel could see them, could see the family she'd built and saved and left behind. "We're okay," he said to the stars, to whatever part of Rachel might be listening. "The kids are adjusting, Claire's healing, and we're all learning how to be a family. It's messy and complicated, and there are days when I don't know what I'm doing, but we're okay. We're going to be okay." The stars offered no response, but Ethan felt a sense of peace settle over him anyway. Rachel's sacrifice hadn't been in vain. 47 children would get justice. Lila and Marcus would grow up safe and loved. The Ward family would survive and even thrive, built on a foundation of love strong enough to transcend death. 3 months later, Ethan found himself standing in Pioneer Rest Cemetery on a brilliant autumn morning, the lilac bushes bare of flowers but still beautiful in their own way. The headstone he'd commissioned had been installed overnight, gray granite, simple and elegant, with Rachel's name and dates in a single line. She gave everything to save everyone. The whole family was there, Marcus and Lila and Claire, Tom and Sarah, Detective Morrison, and even Agent Reeves, who'd flown in from Portland for the occasion. Friends from around town, people whose lives Rachel had touched, former clients from the women's shelter who'd read about her sacrifice in the news. At least 50 people gathered in the lilac grove to honor a woman who'd died alone in a Sacramento motel room, but whose impact rippled out in ways she could never have imagined. Ethan had been asked to say a few words. He stood before the headstone, his children flanking him, and tried to find language adequate to contain Rachel's complexity. "My wife was many things," he began, his voice carrying across the quiet cemetery. "A teacher, a volunteer, a mother, a fighter. She was stubborn and brave and sometimes made decisions the rest of us couldn't understand. But everything she did came from love. Love for her children, love for people she'd never met, love for the idea that the world could be better if someone was willing to fight for it." He paused, collecting himself. "Rachel died 3 years ago trying to expose corruption and save children from exploitation. She succeeded. Because of evidence she spent years collecting, dozens of children are getting justice, and dozens of criminals are facing consequences. That's her legacy. Not the tragedy of her death, but the triumph of her life's work." Lila tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, can I say something?" Ethan nodded, lifting her up so everyone could see her. "Thank you, Mommy," Lila said in her clear child's voice. "Thank you for keeping me safe. Thank you for giving me to Daddy and Marcus. I love you even though I never got to meet you. I'll always love you." Marcus stepped forward next, his voice stronger than Ethan expected. "Mom, I'm going to take care of Lila like you took care of me. I'm going to be brave like you were. I'm going to make you proud." There wasn't a dry eye in the assembly by the time they'd finished. People came forward one by one to lay flowers on the grave, to pay their respects, to thank Rachel for her sacrifice. Tom gripped Ethan's shoulder in silent support. Morrison saluted, a gesture of respect from one protector to another. Claire sobbed openly, mourning her cousin, but also celebrating the woman Rachel had been. After the crowd dispersed, Ethan lingered with his family. They stood together in the lilac grove, where Rachel had hidden the evidence that would save so many lives, where she'd trusted that one day they'd find it and understand. "I think Mommy's happy now," Lila said, holding both Ethan's hand and Marcus's. "I think she knows we're okay." "I think you're right, sweetheart," Ethan agreed. They walked back to the car together, a family of 4 in all the ways that mattered. The grief would never fully disappear. Some losses were too profound to overcome completely. But they had each other. They had Rachel's legacy of courage and sacrifice. They had proof that love could transcend death, that one person's choices could change the world. As they drove away from the cemetery, Lila fell asleep in her car seat, exhausted from the emotion of the day. Marcus stared out the window, quiet and contemplative. Claire dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. And Ethan drove them home to the house where they'd learn to be a family, where they'd continue learning and growing and honoring Rachel's memory by living the lives she died to give them. That evening, with both children tucked into bed and the house finally quiet, Ethan pulled out the box of Rachel's letters that Claire had given him. 24 letters, one for each month of Lila's first 2 years, written by a mother for a daughter she might never see again. He opened the first one, dated the day after Lila was born, and began to read. "My darling Lila," Rachel had written, "today you came into the world, and I fell in love for the third time in my life. First with your father, then with your brother, and now with you. You're so beautiful, so perfect, and I'm so sorry I can't give you the life you deserve. But I promise you this, every choice I make from this moment forward will be to give you a future where you're safe and free. Where you can grow up without fear, without looking over your shoulder, without the shadow of my mistakes following you. That's my gift to you, baby girl. That's how I'll show you I love you." Ethan read all 24 letters that night, tears streaming down his face, his heart breaking and healing in equal measure. Rachel's words painted a picture of desperate love, of a mother separated from her children but never giving up hope. In the final letter, dated 3 years ago, Rachel had written something that felt prophetic. "Lila, by the time you read this, I might not be alive anymore. The work I'm doing is dangerous, and I'm not naive enough to think I'll survive it. But if I don't, I need you to know something. Your father, Ethan, is the best man I've ever known. He's brave and kind, and he'll love you with his whole heart. Your brother Marcus is going to be an amazing big brother. He's got your daddy's courage and my stubbornness, and he'll protect you fiercely. And Aunt Claire has been my anchor through all of this. She'll make sure you understand why I had to leave. You're going to be okay, baby. Even without me, you're going to be more than okay. Because you're surrounded by people who love you, and that's the real magic in this world. Not the fairy tale kind of magic, but the everyday magic of family and sacrifice and choosing to love even when it's hard. Be brave, my darling girl. Be kind. Be fierce. And know that every single day of your life is a gift I fought to give you. I love you bigger than the sky and deeper than the ocean. Always and forever, Mommy." Ethan closed the letter and sat in the darkness, letting Rachel's words wash over him. She'd known. On some level, she'd known she wasn't coming home, and she'd made peace with it because her children's safety mattered more than her own life. That was the purest form of love Ethan had ever witnessed. He climbed the stairs to check on the children one last time before bed. Marcus was sprawled across his mattress in the boneless way of sleeping children, his breathing deep and even. In the room they'd finally finished converting into Lila's bedroom, painted soft lavender with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, his daughter slept with River the bear clutched tight and a smile on her face. Ethan stood in the doorway and made a silent promise to Rachel, to the universe, to himself. He would give these children the life their mother had fought so hard to provide. He would teach them about courage and sacrifice and standing up for what's right. He would make sure they knew their mother's story, all of it, the complicated truth without sanitization or fairy tale endings. He would love them fierce and wild and true. "We're going to be okay, Rachel," he whispered into the darkness. "I promise you, we're going to be more than okay." And somewhere in the space between sleep and waking, between grief and hope, Ethan could almost feel Rachel's presence, could almost hear her whispered response. "I know you will, baby. I always knew you would." The next morning dawned bright and clear, a new day full of ordinary magic. Ethan made pancakes for breakfast while Marcus and Lila argued good-naturedly about which cartoon to watch. Claire shuffled into the kitchen in her bathrobe, accepting coffee with a grateful smile. The doorbell rang, Tom dropping by with fresh bagels from the bakery downtown, because that's what good friends did. Sarah called to confirm plans for the weekend barbecue. It was normal and chaotic, and occasionally frustrating and absolutely beautiful. This was what Rachel had died for. Not grand gestures or headlines, but this. Breakfast table arguments and homework assistance and skinned knees and goodnight kisses. The precious, messy, miraculous work of being a family. Through the kitchen window, Ethan could see the river in the distance, the water that had brought Lila home and changed everything. It flowed steady and strong, carrying the past toward the future, washing clean and moving forward. Like his family, like Rachel's legacy, like love itself. And in that moment, watching his children laugh together while morning light painted everything gold, Ethan understood something profound. Rachel wasn't really gone. She lived on in Lila's hazel eyes and Marcus's stubborn courage. In the 47 children who'd received justice, in the family she'd built from sacrifice and hope. Death had taken her body, But it couldn't touch the love she'd left behind. That love would ripple forward through generations, an endless gift that kept giving. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real happy ending after all. Not perfect or painless, but real and true and worth every sacrifice it took to create. The river flowed on, the sun rose higher, and the Ward family lived and loved and honored the woman who'd given them everything, one ordinary, extraordinary day at a time.